Okay, so my name is Mark Sargent. I am going to be reading Inside an Open Hand, Essays from a Flat Earth by Natasha Mauerman. We're going to do this in one take. We're not going to do this with any editing or AI or anything else like that. So there will be some mistakes. There will be a couple hiccups here and there, and I hopefully won't happen to hit the pause button too much in the process. So here we go. The advisor on this is Thomas Hummel. This is an Honors College Senior Capstone Project, Western Washington University, spring 2026. I'll read the table of contents. Introduction. Why I don't care about physical systems. You don't sound Russian at all. Benefits of doubt. Two wings of the same bird. In the rock capital of the world. What are you waiting for? Since Kenzie said cult, a tune and two Daves, three if you count Weiss, cut them out and renounce, it happens here too, what distance doesn't end, when I knew, and how to tell a conversion story. Yes, there is a thunderstorm in the background, so if you hear something that sounds like thunder, well, probably is. I didn't add special effects. So, introduction. There we go. 2 years ago, I received a single like on a response tweet to a Pop Crave post about singer-songwriter Sabrina Carpenter. She just told Pandora, my favorite thing about being a Taurus is that I get to use the excuse, I'm sorry, I'm a Taurus. It kind of works in every facet of life. Enraged, I wrote, I hate astrology so much because everybody fucking says this about their own zodiac sign. Anyone born during any month can do whatever they want with no explanation because their birthday is during the calendar year. Grow up. Like crystals, ghosts, and God before it, astrology was a nemesis. I found the concept and its popularity infuriating, the mark of a culture's disinterest in verifiable knowledge. Despite knowing next to nothing about them, I was invested in science and its facts. Astrology, as pseudoscience, was nothing more than misinformation skating by because it's fun. People who know things know it lacks validity, and I was obviously someone who knows things. Over time, I softened towards other supernatural concepts with a semi-condescending respect for their emotional weight and societal influence. Astrology, though, I could not shake contempt for. I feigned interest during my first week of college to score potential friend points, but I knew there was a limit to my tolerance. Reality is reality, after all. To make matters worse, astrology was gendered in unseemly ways, too, a woman's hobby, which somehow made it immune to criticism while still associating women with things that are stupid and wrong, kind of like romantasy novels. I was even able to warp my distaste into postured progressivism. Under no other circumstances is it permissible to judge someone's character based on the uncontrollable circumstances of their birth, so why should celestial angles make it okay? Early in the process of Inside an Open Hand, I expressed all this to my advisor, Thomas Hummel. Tom created space for this project's existence in any number of ways, enabling my most trusted instincts, matching my obsessive dedication to the work, cutting countless adverbs, but when I asked him to describe his role, he didn't mention any of that. He said his job was getting me to doubt my doubt, which took a while, he said. And yet, over the course of 9 months, during which no fewer than 47 hours of audio were exchanged between us, I reached the understanding that my faith in scientific authority was no different than someone else's faith in God. For the astrology question, he suggested I talk to Dr. Kathleen Bryan, a scholar of disability history at Western Washington University, who really does not want to be called a historian, but who does have an interest in reading relationships and light. As it happens, I didn't know anything about astrology. The pop version, the mainstream sun sign mess, wow, that I despised was just a modern offshoot of something much more complicated. Astrology isn't casual in the way we often treat it, Dr. Bryan told me. It's correlative, the observation of geometric patterns in relation to human events. It's just another way of telling stories. She showed me how natal charts map celestial bodies' physical positions in relation to Earth, complete with a horizon line. I felt a little embarrassed and more than a little enlightened. Dr. Bryan also asked what drew me to Flat Earth. I had to think about it. Years ago, I watched the documentary Behind the Curve, which followed notable flat earthers in the lead up to their first international conference. I loved many aspects of it, but more than anything, I was endeared by the flat earthers' commitment. They built life and lives and community around a single belief. Researching and experimenting, making art and organizing meetups, they hold firm in the face of mockery. It was admirable. I wanted a similar level of commitment to conversation and research. This project, like Flat Earth, had to be a lifestyle. With this commitment, Dr. Bryan asked, didn't I feel I was part of the community, even if I didn't share the core belief in name? Kind of. For 2 of the 3 academic quarters I worked, I wrote nothing. I watched videos and conducted interviews and watched more videos and went to Arizona and conducted more interviews and watched more videos. I never felt fully integrated, though. Not without belief and its consequences. But I didn't feel I was part of the Globe community anymore either. Their level of misunderstanding and cruelty was inaccessible to me, often to a point of confusion. In Flat Earth spaces, I was still a Glober. In Glober spaces, I defended Flat Earth so staunchly that my alignment had to be more than mere scholarship. I wasn't flat, but I was no longer Globe. This made the whole project very Saturn, Dr. Bryan explained. It's the planet that rules commitment and concrescence over time. It's also the threshold planet, the boundary between the parts of the solar system that are visible to the naked eye and all of what's beyond. And it sounded like I was at a threshold. Flat Earth and astrology have a fair amount in common. They're met with bullish opinions. They use the work of ancients for contemporary creation. They're both concerned with positionality. In fact, position accounts for the most important thing to know Flat Earth. It's not about shape at all. It's about Earth's place in the universe. Most people think of Earth as a spherical planet among spherical planets within a solar system. They see that system in a galaxy 100,000 light years wide, and that galaxy as one of 2 trillion in an ever-expanding universe, which may be one of the countless more all moving at breakneck speed. In the grand scheme of things, this kind of thinking makes the Earth pretty much nothing. People love to ask why Earth would be flat in such a system of otherwise spherical planets. Easy. Those planets don't exist the way we think they do. Our celestial bodies are small and local, built with intention to provide light and time. These bodies and the Earth are protected by a firmament, a dome-shaped sky created by parting the waters above the universe. And before they can ask any follow-up questions, I try to say, trust me. Any evidence you put forth to prove otherwise, flat earthers will have answers for. But they bring them out anyway. The obvious ones, sunsets, boats falling over the horizon, are nothing more than quirks of perspective and atmospheric refraction. The trickier ones, gravity, the Coriolis effect, require elaborate explanations that have something to do with electromagnetism. I really don't understand them, but I also don't understand gravity on the globe, so there's that. Then there are those which lack awareness of the flat Earth models altogether. Seasons, shadows, oceans flowing off the Earth. Flat Earth operates on an azimuthal equidistant projection with the North Pole at the center and the continents fanning out around it. Antarctica acts as a ring, closing everything in. The sun, whose local position allows for shifting shadows, follows a circular track, which oscillates north and south, creating the same seasonal effects as it does on a globe model. While we're at it, no, you've never seen the curvature of the Earth from a commercial airplane. They don't fly high enough. We can, and I have had to, go on like this. If the goal is to foment discontent, quibbling over the really real evidence of round or not round will even bring us to the point where inter-community conflict manifests itself. Because again, being flat isn't the thing that matters. There is no agreed upon flat Earth model. Even if there were, flat doesn't mean flat. Flat means a created Earth. The Creator doesn't have to be the Christian God, but it often is. The lack of space above the firmament means that both Creator and heavens are close to us. All kinds of things could be beneath us, but we know the ground is steady. We are the only thing in the universe overflowing with divine purpose, watched over with care. Where then does conspiracy fit in? Imagine you're someone of incomparable power on Earth, someone with a vested interest in maintaining and expanding your singular importance. You don't want citizens to know their worth. You don't want them knowing that they're loved. You want them self-assessed as meaningless specks in endless space, plagued by random and unavoidable suffering. You want them to believe that's the way things have been and have to be. If you have the means to manage it, wouldn't it be worth it to disguise the nature of place? To force everyone but you into certain insignificance? Wouldn't you, with all your resources, invent rocket ships and satellites and photographs from space trips? If the official image of the globe on nasa.gov is a composite, with repeated cloud patterns where zoomed-in images have been stitched together, which it absolutely is, regardless of your thoughts on Earth type, what else might be done? If you can convince us to deny our senses, to ignore the world before us, you can do anything you want with us. That's the sad part of Flat Earth. The question of who's doing all this lying results in sadder answers, but despite that sadness, a flat future is a promising one. If each of us knew, without doubt, we were created equally and with love, then arbitrary power would have to fail. A flat future has no need for borders or race or class or any other categorical construction devised to make us separate and small. Difference would not lead to violence. Truth would be fluid and in flux, nurtured through invention. We'd teach and help and try always. On a flat Earth, we'd treat one another better. In a flat future, we'll want to change daily. I can't think of anything lovelier than that. Part 2, or next part. We're not going to number these. Why I don't care about physical systems. Flat Earthers and Globers love the evidence pit. It's deep and it spirals and it's filled with words like distance and refraction and curvature and reality. It's the most boring place in the fucking world and everyone wants to take me there. Astrophotography, gravity, the southern celestial pole, alternatively, long-distance photography, water finding its level, undetectable motion. These are the evidence bits that most conviction in an Earth model is grounded in, which means we've all heard them like a billion fucking times. When I know they're coming, all I hear are peanuts adults. I wish I could say it's because I'm fluent in all the evidence, even the bits from the pit's deepest reaches, the kind you need to know actual physics for. But the truth is, I don't care. I've never cared. I spent most of my high school physics class watercoloring. I just don't see the point of all these reaches. If you're in the pit, you're in the pit. You're entrenched in the assumptions you made while you were circling the edge. Each new proof piece is piled on the premise of the one that came before it. The rebuttals and the rebuttals to the rebuttals and the rebuttals aren't even speaking to each other anymore. Maybe if you're talking to someone who's already agreeing with you, someone who cares a whole lot about the intricacies of the physical world, it's interesting. Still, it's not a conversation, which means I don't give a shit. I want to talk. Don't get me wrong, I love a fun fact. Did you know there's a moth in Madagascar that co-evolved with the orchid it feeds from, competing until both the moth's proboscis and the orchid spur were a foot long? That's pretty cool. But you know what the interesting part of the story is? Charles Darwin predicted the existence of the moth after getting the orchid in the mail. It wasn't actually found until 20 years after his death. He got the credit for coming up with coevolution, but it took another 90 years for anyone to observe the moth feeding from the orchid. Until then, we'd all agreed he was probably right. Knowledge isn't that impressive if it's always been out there, waiting to be found as souvenirs of factful knickknacks on our march towards truth. What's impressive is that we make it, conceive it. Observations can mean anything. A moth sipping orchids means a moth sipping orchids. What creates knowledge is narrative development, the effort and persistence of education. You can use tools to show eclipses, prove the Earth is whatever shape you choose, but only if our stories tell the tool's tale first. We've agreed to think about the world together because we built the way we think it. Flat Earthers have agreed to think about the world differently. In doing so, they've built a different world. You can say it doesn't count as real knowledge because its origins lie in faith. If you must, but I have another fun fact for you. Pythagoras was the first to say the Earth was a globe, and his only concrete reason was that a sphere is just so perfect that the gods made it. They made the universe from a whole bunch of spheres. We don't really have any evidence that he said that. Best believe, though, that Aristotle and Eratosthenes and every other astronomer that came before them built globes out of it. So no, I don't really want to hear about how water does or does not cling to a ball, or winds, like winds. I don't want to hear about a centrifugal force either. And dear fucking God, I really do not want to hear anything else about the horizon. I want to hear about what it takes to write the story. I want to hear about how trust is formed in a community built on distrust. I want to hear about people. Next section. You don't sound Russian at all. Over homemade pear bread, which I am assured is better with butter, Mark Sargent told me about the end of the world. It was coming soon. Again. Civilizations, Mark says, are cyclical. They have been many before us, and there will be many after us. You can see the remnants of our predecessors all around, the Egyptian pyramids, the Yonaguni Monument, I don't remember that one, Bimini Road, Machu Picchu, the list goes on. But they're gone now, and not as an accidental consequence of time. The first time God ended a civilization is recorded in Genesis. It was a monoculture, a focused but boring group who were good at what they did. They existed before conflict, making technological advancements swift and frictionless. Eventually, they decided they were going to build a bridge to the Creator himself, the Tower of Babel. This speaks to the shape of the earth, of course. If the Tower of Babel existed on a globe model, it would be nothing more than a toothpick on an apple. But on a flat earth, up is up. The firmament has a reachable boundary, and the first humans were making their way to the top. During construction, Mark says, you could feel the dome shake. God wasn't super into this and decided to start again. This time, people would have language to divide them. They would scatter across the world. While they might struggle to unite, they would know what it means to make. New texts would become new cultures, which would lead to books and movies and music. Theirs, ours, would be a novelty world. But we haven't created anything new in a while. Mark sends his regards to Gen Z, but we were born into an unsustainable world. The creative engine is running on fumes. All that's left is to accept what the world really is, a massive soundstage. built for telling stories. Mark cares about good writing, and he doesn't want the third act of our civilization to drag on for too long. The time has come, and the end better be big. A spaceship, maybe. One with a button inside to raise the house lights, draw the curtains back, and terminate everything else. He wouldn't tell me this until later, but Mark wants to be the guy to press it. When I told people I was visiting Mark, their eyebrows arched. Alone? I'd say yes, it's fine, and deliver a practiced monologue about email records, his public address, and how everyone in my life knew where I was going to be. It did not diminish their fears. More than once, I was met with a lengthy graphic description of imminent dismemberment. One concerned coworker insisted we exchanged live location tracking permissions. It was all very sweet and very ridiculous. On optics alone, it never would have occurred to me that there might be similar worries from Mark's community. The college girl driving to an island for an older man she'd met online isn't the one who does the murdering. This, of course, is a gross way to think about things. Mark's been subjected to far more online threats than I have in his time. His audience was keenly aware of this. Mark hosts a podcast called Strange World on YouTube, which has been described to me on numerous occasions as a place for flat earthers to hang out and blow off steam. Its introduction runs about 10 minutes with a dedicated song, glow stick drumming, and scripted shout-outs to its loyal listeners. To understand all the references made in a Strange World episode, you need to have years of flat earth experience and fluency in surrounding conspiracies. It's welcoming to newcomers, but it's not often a person's introduction to flat earth. Strange World is co-hosted by DJ Curious, who was invited to take up the mantle after frequent call-ins as a listener. When Mark mentioned on air that I was coming by to interview him, DJ echoed the same worries as the folks on my end, albeit with less genuine concern for Mark's life. Well, make sure you're not falling for some kind of secret assassin or something. Mark repeated my monologue. Oh, please, I live a charmed life. What's she gonna do? There's an email trail. DJ leaned a little too hard into a sexy Russian spy bit I didn't love, but we reconciled in the comment section. No one seemed convinced I was a honeypot, but there were genuine anxieties in play. A month later at the International Truth Expo, I was told that it was good to see me in the flesh because you hear things, and the man I was talking to knew how the deep state worked. Even in recent Strange World comments, people warned Mark that I might be one of those people who thinks Flat Earth is a cult. Mark's conception of publicity differs from the average Flat Earthers. He'll agree to any interview. Exposure is king. It's not that he doesn't know there are people who want to smear Flat Earth. It's that he doesn't care so long as the audience grows. Even if it means engaging cynical documentarians or National Geographic reporters with bones to pick. He's planting seeds in people's minds. I'm neither a documentarian nor a journalist, and I have no intentions of making Flat Earth look bad. But there wasn't any way for Mark's audience to know that. I had to tread carefully. The problem with Whidbey Island is that there's only one real road. Aside from a few intersections in Oak Harbor, it provides little reason to stop, slow down, or adhere to its comically low 55 miles per hour speed limit. You can cruise at 80 through the farmland and keep your eyes on the Olympics in the distance, except you can't, because every 10 minutes or so, the car in front of you will come to a screeching halt for an unsignaled swerve into one of the driveways on either side of the highway. Each time this happens, you forget it happened 10 minutes ago. The drive is only made more precarious when you're emailing a flat earther about parking on his property. It wasn't the first time I had made that drive. Well, it wasn't the first time that I'd ridden that drive. My friend Ava had done the driving. I'd made her and our friend Carly in the passenger seat watch behind the curve the night before. I'd seen it several times, but I hadn't logged in on Letterboxd until that rewatch. 5 stars. I have a parasocial relationship with Mark Sargent. In my favorite scene, which I later learned was the first one they filmed, Mark stands on a beach gazing at the distant skyline. "That's the Seattle," he says. He takes a stick, draws an arc in the sand, then marks 2 points. "The bottoms of those buildings," he said, "should not be visible from Whidbey. There should be too much curvature between us and them." That weekend, I wondered how close that beach was to each one we visited. Again, to be clear, Mark's address is public. It's in the description of all his videos. So really, if it happened to be on our route, wouldn't it have been weird, maybe irresponsible, if we hadn't found his house? Once we passed the no trespassing private property signs and reached our last private road where we had to turn around anyway, wouldn't it have been outlandish not to follow it to its end? I mean, the house at the end was beautiful, and I'd already gotten photos of other strangers' beautiful houses. Wasn't it reasonable for me to have added one more? And since the mailbox at the end of the drive just so happened to say Sargent, wouldn't I have been letting everyone down if I hadn't taken a photo of that too? If the answer to any of these questions is no, and you are Ava, I'm sorry for what you went through. If the answer to any of those questions is no, and you are Mark, I'd only ever been to Whidbey once before to visit Langley. Mark says that if Flat Earth was a university, he would be its freshman recruiter. He explains this in the first chapter of his audiobook, where in a matter of seconds the metaphor turns into software, then a school of fish, then an army, but comes back round since every great military force has an academy behind it. If we're counting other universities, Flat Earth University would be Mark's third. First, Washington State University, where he attended at 17 after graduating high school early. Too early, he thinks, as he spent his only year in Pullman drinking. Then Western Washington University, which he was kicked out of for manufacturing explosives on campus. We'll circle back to that. Then, after cheating his way through an online pinball tournament, he spent 20 years in Boulder, Colorado, working in tech. If gaming deception is a learning environment, I guess Flat Earth would really be his fourth. Mark returned to live with his family on Whidbey in 2015, the same year he became Flat Earth famous. I have heard Mark tell the story of how he got into Flat Earth so many times I could recite it from memory. He'd been into other conspiracies since 2002, JFK, 9/11, New World Order, and Flat Earth was the last one on his list. It's last on everyone's list, he says, because it just sounds so absurd. His initial research, like anyone else's, aimed to disprove it. But he was drawn down the rabbit hole at 3:30 a.m. on February 10th, 2015. He woke up and just knew. He started making the Flat Earth Clues videos as a call to be proven wrong. He assumed the vast expanse of the internet would find mistakes in his math, a bit of evidence he overlooked, anything that would reaffirm his gold belief. And sure, there was pushback, but still no smoking gun. Mark's work picked up traction in an unconventional way. The original videos on the Flat Earth Clues playlist have sizable view counts, ranging from a few 100,000 to 1.2 million. Mark, though, has always had a democratic approach to content creation. He registered under a Creative Commons license, which means anyone can repost or re-edit his videos as they see fit. Versions of the Flat Earth Clues edited into 2-hour documentaries with titles like Under the Dome and They Are Hiding God with the Greatest Lie Ever have up to 10 times the views of the originals. Eventually, the viewers made their way back to Mark. Soon enough, he was the face of Flat Earth 2.0. To call what commenced an interview would be generous. To me, I had a notebook of questions in my pocket and I never touched it. Instead, starstruck, I let Mark talk for 6 straight hours. There were points when he tried to let me ask a question and I just sputtered a bunch of nothing until he re-picked up one of his own threads. Often these threads were movie summaries. By hour 4, we had run Flat Earth related lore out and we were into an assortment of historical semi-conspiracies. Mark had a weird take on the Panama Canal. Construction started in the 1880s with the French, who bailed after losing 20,000 workers to malaria and yellow fever. When the Americans took over, they brought mosquito repellent and netting, but estimated a further 10,000 deaths before the thing could be finished. Here's the conspiracy. When the lead engineers, who Mark referred to as we, began recruitment efforts for construction workers, they stayed tight-lipped about the threat of disease. There was a 1 in 10 chance of death, nearly 6,000 of the American workforce. Mark didn't mention that most of these were black Caribbean contract workers paid 10 cents an hour on the silver roll, while white American gold roll employees made double in less dangerous positions. The cost of the Panama Canal, with French and American efforts combined, can be estimated at 500 lives per mile. The question is, Mark said, did the ends justify the means? Mark thinks it did, at least from America's perspective. We do most things that way, he said. The ends justifying the very unpleasant means. The Alamo, the Spanish-American War, recently Venezuela. Can you put a price on human life? Yes, you can. We do it all the time. You don't see guys at the chess table crying over pawns. But the Panama Canal raised another question for Mark, a question less about life and more about truth. Should the workers have known the risk of taking on the job? Did the engineers have a duty to full disclosure? Maybe not. After all, there's only so much truth the public can handle. Most of them are NPCs, non-playable characters with no agency at all, which is part of why they react so furiously to learning how things really work. The truther community has the best of intentions, Mark said, but they can't see far enough ahead to realize that if everything is questioned, then our systems cease to function. Sometimes omitting the truth makes you part of the greater good. I don't know if I'll ever experience a more relieving incoming phone call than the one DJ Curious made while I perched on the edge of Mark's couch. I was still a little wary of DJ even after our comments section peacemaking. I didn't know anything about him. I later learned that he considered himself an unlikely flat earther, that he comes from an LGBTQ community and was raised Jehovah's Witness, that he's dedicated to finding a place for himself and others like him in the community. That's his commitment to God is serious and evident. I didn't learn any of that when he called, though. Mostly I learned that DJ is really, really nice. He apologized for teasing me on Strange World, but he knew I would be reporting back to Mother Russia. I'd have fun at the conference, he insisted. People would be lovely and I would learn a lot, but I didn't have to make my mind up right away. He thanked me for not hog-tying and strangling his friend, reported that he was on his way to a Flat Earth meetup in Los Angeles, and then he was off. I didn't know if it was the unanticipated kindness of DJ's reassurance or maybe just the breaking of the day's routine, but something about the call gave me gumption. Mark had gone to school at Western Washington University, the same school I'd just told DJ I was attending, and he'd lived on the same street as me. When he asked if I had anything else for him, the only thing I had in mind was seeing his old house. There were a few barriers. To start, Mark had a hard time getting into Street View. This wasn't helped by the fact that he was using Bing Maps, which I didn't know existed. We spent a while in satellite mode, just trying to zoom in far enough to find individual houses, before I suggested we switch to Google. Things have changed since Mark lived in Bellingham. Homes have been remodeled and demolished in favor of apartment complexes, and even the streets themselves had been changed. High Street, Garden Street, Forest Street. Oh, they renamed this. Who the hell is Billy Frank Jr.? Did he die in a car accident? He was a Native American environmental activist. No, that would explain it. I'm pretty sure that was Indian Street at one point. That makes sense as a rename. Yeah, of course it would. And that's where you would do it. Why wouldn't you? We didn't find Mark's house. It might have been torn down or just hidden behind trees. I showed him mine, though, where the camera had captured my roommate's car parked on the street. A block towards campus, there was a building he recognized, a near-cubic apartment building with a Spanish tile roof. He dated a girl who lived there. I pass it on my walk to campus every day. There is something about arriving at a restaurant in a car with an It's Flat license plate that gives you newfound respect for the driver. The parking lot was small, but I kept wondering if the people walking by knew, didn't know, didn't notice, or noticed and wondered what it meant. Mark, I assumed, was unconcerned. I'd wondered if he'd ever been worried about it, and if he had, how long it had taken him to get over it. What did it take to present oneself with such openness? I imagine it took hardening. I imagine it was painful. Surrounded by chattering families and the clanging of silverware, Mark told me a story. He'd told me the first half earlier, and earlier than that, he told me the whole thing on the very first episode of Strange World. It goes like this. When Mark was a teenager, he did fireworks shows on the beach for the 4th of July, that same beach from behind the curve. He'd made the fireworks himself by pouring flash powder, the kind old-timey photographers used to use, into cardboard tubes that burst when lit. But he was over-enthusiastic, and he made far, far too many for the shows he was putting on. When he got to college, he drove out to a nearby reservation and asked if there was something he could trade them for. As it turned out, he could trade them for $5 apiece. He returned to Western's campus and hatched a plan. Before long, he had 32 students working for him. His girlfriend, the bulk of the men's track team, women with nimble fingers who were better at drilling holes and cutting fuses. This was a high-functioning operation with investors, a storage locker full of chemicals, and time cards for his employees. He made enough money to rent a house on Lake Whatcom during the off-season. Mark, as they say, was winning. But all empires fall, and Mark's was no different. He hired a new woman, blonde, from New York, and his girlfriend didn't like her. Mark did not tell me in explicit terms why, but you can connect the dots. Or you can listen to the first episode of Strange World, where he makes the conflict more transparent. Regardless, Mark needed to fire her. She didn't take it well. If he did this, she said, he would need to pay her up front for the work she planned to do over the summer. If not, she would be forced to drop a dime on him. Men talk a lot of shit, Mark said. But if a woman threatens you, you should take it seriously. Because this one called the FBI. Mark didn't know that yet, though, because the FBI didn't care. This was pre-9/11, after all, and she was, no offense to me, just some college student. But she was persistent, and 2 weeks later, the FBI transferred her call to the ATF. The ATF jotted Mark's name down and, on another case, came across the company selling his chemicals. They interrupted his mom as she served pie and ice cream, and she gave them the address for his storage locker. It took a year to indict him, and it went about as well as it could possibly go. In the public defender's office, he was told that the judge assigned to his case was John Kuhnhauer. Funny thing that John Kuhnhauer happens to have a cabin on the same beach Mark hosted his very first fireworks show on, and he happened to have donated to Mark's fund for the last 4th of July party. And his son happened to have dated Mark's sister in college. Mark got another judge. He was connected to this one too, although he doesn't think she remembered him from the co-judging of the chili cook-off. The prosecutor thought he had it in the bag, but all Mark got was 3 years probation, a $1,000 fine, and a community service, which he fulfilled by helping out in a school computer lab. There's a felony on his record, though, so he can't vote or do jury duty or buy guns. Wink, wink. It's America. Do you wish you could vote? No, Mark scoffed. Mark's mom had made the pear bread. She lives with Mark in that beautiful house, bordered by a little orchard and a garden and alder trees, whose branches have dramatically but repairably fallen on the garden during windstorms. The whole time I was with Mark, she was upstairs, near the dining table where she runs Bible study every Tuesday. The table overlooks the grassy hill below, where deer drop their antlers in the spring. I got to meet her on our way out to lunch. After listening to the recordings of the day, Tom tells me in kinder words that this was one of the few moments where I let myself be Natasha. Mark's mom's name is Patty, and she wanted to know what I planned to do after graduation. She gave us advice on where to go for lunch. Some places were closed on Sundays during the winter. She asked if I was getting any good pointers from Mark so far. It had been 2 hours, so yes, several. She shot him a pointed look. Yeah, Mark does talk a lot. It's great, I assured her. It's so helpful. Oh, good. I couldn't control my laugh at the pause that came after. Mark couldn't either. Sorry, she added. I try to keep him humble. Mark's family donates to church groups often, and his sister runs an inn on the island. In his garage, there were coffee makers, an iron, dishes, purses, travel-sized toiletries, and a bag of never-worn clothes. Mark said I could take whatever I wanted, which I declined. He also offered a computer monitor, a 30-inch Dell that I or a student friend might want. I had no use for it, but my friend Kamiko did, so as I left, he helped me carry it to my car. I was a little embarrassed about Mark seeing the inside of my trunk. A Subaru Forester is great for camping and coastal road trips, but it's a disaster for those of us who don't fully unpack. There were scattered hiking boots and tevas, a gallon jug of water, outdoor-only blankets, and a metric fuck-ton of sand. We opted for the back seat. As dusk approached, Mark laid the monitor face down on top of one of the blankets to keep it safe on the drive home. I thanked my former self for remembering to fold it. The beach from behind the curve, the one Mark used for fireworks, is called Useless Bay. Mark used to live on that beach, but his family's cabin has since been torn down. The property values have skyrocketed in the wake of Seattle's tech boom, and now the beach is only accessible if you're a member of Useless Bay Golf and Country Club. Mark's no longer a member, but the sticker on the rear window of his car says he is, so we were set. Useless Bay Beach is breathtaking. The whole of Whidbey Island is breathtaking, but we'd caught this beach on a good day. It was sunny for November, and the water glittered. The tide was higher than it had been when Behind the Curve was shot, so there were no limp beds of seaweed, just driftwood and smooth gray stones. I asked Mark if it felt different to be on that beach now, having grown up on it, when the world was a different shape. He took a moment to think about it. It makes it more intimate. If this place was built, then it was built with purpose. It's not an accident. It's not the Big Bang. You're not just some random speck in the freaking universe. And it was very well designed. No, it's a beautiful place. When Mark crouched close to my shoulder to point at the horizon, I swear I could hear the Behind the Curve soundtrack. See those little buildings out there? Oh, yeah? That's Seattle. Next part. Benefits of doubt. In the flat versus globe debate, you must believe in lying. Not believe as in lying is a positive course of action, but believe as in lying exists and it's a thing people often do. Which is not to say one can't believe in an earthly model without subscribing to the concept of deception, but rather that if you want to destroy the other model, you have to assume there's lying afoot. For flat earthers, this is obvious. The entire global world is a grand deception. We've built rockets and sound stages and research institutions to prop up the lie that Earth is a ball flying through outer space, which is also a lie. It's hard to know how far the lying goes, but for it all to keep spinning, there must be powerful people who spend a lot of time crafting falsehoods to make the rest of us feel small. When the globe folks, the lies are institutionally small, but interpersonally immense. They require each and every member of the flat earth community to be fakers, non-believers. They can only ever be trolls, grifters, or on their way from troll to grifter. If you assume the flat community is riddled with attention seekers and agitators, you, like too many others, ask me, do the flat earthers you've spoken to really believe what they're saying, or are they just trying to score internet points? Yes, they do, and no, they aren't. There are and have been exceptions, but their stunts are so obvious that they really don't count. Deception is dulled when the deceiver is always grinning at the camera. But if you believe leading flat earthers are lying maliciously, you don't so much question them as condemn them. You think they know exactly what's wrong with their model. You say they know it's false and absurd, but since their dim-witted audiences are cash grabs, they keep up the facade. That's when troll for you becomes grifter. And once you know how to gift grifterhood, you can dismiss anybody who profits from the things you disagree with. Anyone who promotes alternative medicine is a grifter. All creationists are grifters. If someone has a podcast, they're probably a grifter. Everyone is lying about their beliefs and all secretly share yours, which are uniquely objective and correct. The trouble is, I don't believe in lying. I understand that it exists. Kids lie to me about doing their homework all the time. My coworker lies to our boss about being sick the day of a concert. I lie to the doctor about my smoking habits. It happens. But those are just shortcuts. To knowingly lie for nefarious purposes, to slander someone or to exploit an audience or to control the world, I don't really think anyone is doing that. I once explained this to someone and they responded aghast, well, what about like dictators or whatever? Okay, there are people who do horrible things that they get away with by saying untrue stuff. Here's the thing. I don't know if they know those things are untrue. People are pretty good at telling themselves stories before they tell them in public. The kid who hasn't done their math homework did do a few problems during a lunch, and they're definitely going to finish it at home. So for the purposes for making a study plan for the week, it's already done. My coworkers sent our boss an email asking for this day off months ago. So based on our time off policy, sickness was pre-guaranteed. I know I'll stop smoking if it becomes a problem, so I don't really need to hear someone tell me why it's bad again. Of course, the narratives get more twisted if you're faking your identity to scam Tinder matches or keeping secret families, but I can't imagine there aren't narratives behind them, or at least ideas that could become narratives if certain circumstances changed. Maybe those circumstances are abundance or love or justice. Maybe lying is just a manifestation of hope. It really doesn't matter, though, not unless we decide it does, not unless we want it to be true, and anything could be true as long as you tell it the right way. Then again, I may just be a grifter. Next section. Two wings of the same bird. Shortly after U.S. Immigration and Custom Enforcement agents killed 2 civilians in Minneapolis, Minnesota last January, I emailed my 7th grade history teacher about a vision I have for the Flat Earth community. It involves transcending political differences to wrest power from forces that arbitrarily divide us. It involves loving your neighbor and refusing unjust authority. It is a vision flat earthers see too, but one they have yet to fulfill. For all accounts, flat earth should be a movement that resists political polarization, and in theory it does. It's against corporate media's divisive storytelling. It's got distaste for technocrat billionaires regardless of affiliation. It believes we're all treated like ants in a jar, shaken to induce infighting. Among the hundreds of laminated 8x11 posters on the walls of the International Truth Expo, there was a blurry graphic of a bald eagle, one wing tinted red and the other tinted blue. Over and over, I'm told that a flat earth means we should strive to understand each other. At its core, I believe this message is true. But the community is not immune to the perils of present-day politics. Flat earth comes in a package of viewpoints one party has staked its claims to. Vaccine skepticism, creationism, and a critical eye toward almost anything mainstream science or public education produces. Conservatism is not a prerequisite or even an inevitability, but it isn't exactly a secret that flat earth is shadowed by a bird's red wing, which isn't problematic in and itself, but it gets in the way of the movement's core messaging more frequently than not, so much so that Mark doesn't really see birds anymore. He just calls us red team and blue team. The murders of Renee Good and Alex Preddy should have mattered to flat earthers, not just their unwarranted violence, but also their subsequent manipulation by media and by federal authorities. Direct, verifiable video evidence from no fewer than 10 angles between the two shootings, flagrantly contradicted by stories designed to instill fear and sow division. This is what Flat Earth claims to be fighting against, yet community response ranged from disinterest to psyops to assertions that, in the end, good and pretty were at fault. But when I asked Mark why the community reacted this way, he responded confidently, because it was a blue team victim. That's the only reason. This was not the answer I wanted to hear. It was, in fact, exactly what I had avoided this kind of question for months. Then I remembered Tom telling me about a group of students he'd overheard recently. They were discussing the bitterness and fear they'd felt since the 2024 presidential election. They decided that we'd all be better off if the American South just slipped into the ocean. I thought, red team victims. I remembered how many times I'd seen the progressive peers turn their noses up at Christians, respond to assertions of faith with dismissal or suspicion, how they talk about evangelism and gender roles and homophobia without an inkling of what a given person might believe, the way they invoke slurs against themselves and act as if they come from the lips of someone who's done little more than pray. Again, I thought, red team victims. All I had were more questions. When I heard back from Mr. Oliveri, he was unsurprisingly thoughtful. He reminded me of something that I know but forget to believe. He told me that debates aren't a matter of instants. They are complicit and evolve over the course of decades as the seeds we sow along the way begin to grow. At least he said that's what he tries to keep in mind when he struggles. I responded and he responded, and as often happens, I forgot to write him back. I guess this is the way for me to say, Dear Mr. Oliveri, thanks for helping me see more birds. Next section, in the rock capital of the world. If you walk toward the hills behind the Super 8 in Quartzsite, Arizona, you'll find the historic Grandview Mine. According to its Google Maps listing, if you take an ATV beyond the hills, you'll find impressive wooden structures and rusted machinery along the rocks. You will not see them if you walk toward the hills behind the Super 8. If you walk towards the hills behind the Super 8, you'll see 4 concrete steps strewn with shopping carts and bonfire ash. On the second step, faded graffiti will read, God loves you. The letters will be arranged to form a cross. If you are in Quartzsite for your first Flat Earth conference, you will walk towards the hills to avoid another anxious hour at the Super 8. You will find this poignant. 9 of my 54 photos from the International Truth Expo are of my walk behind the Super 8. Armed with a handheld microphone, a tiny notebook full of questions, and not enough sleep, I was on a mission to avoid mistrust. A month earlier, I'd called Carol, International Truth Expo's founder and organizer, with questions about ticket prices and camping, and as our conversation progressed, I realized I needed to clarify who I was and what I was doing. Carol had reasonable suspicions. In 2023, YouTuber Tyler Oliveira pretended to be a flat earther, crashed Flattoberfest in Las Vegas to gather unfiltered footage before dramatically revealing his true position in the middle of a Q&A. In his video, he whips off a Flat Earth t-shirt to reveal another t-shirt, which reads, I'm a Glober. Prove me wrong for $1,000. Mark escorts him from the room. I hadn't heard of the stunt before my call with Carol, but after watching it, I was mortified. I spent days begging people to promise I wasn't doing anything similar. Oliveira's recent titles include such hits as I Exposed Texas Indian Invasion and Inside the New York Town Invaded by Welfare-Addicted Jews. He has 9.2 million subscribers, and I'm not one of them. I needed Carol to know that. I assured her that I wasn't up to trolling of any kind, expecting further and more directed suspicion, but she was excited. My project could be tremendous exposure for the conference, and if I was up for it, I could even be its official student reporter. I was daunted by the prospect of visibility, but Carol said the other attendees would be eager to talk to me too. They might give me a hard time at first, but they just want to wake me up to the truth. But now it was real, and upon my return from the near side of the historic Grandview Mine, I recognized leading flat earther Dave Weiss in the hotel parking lot. With a discomforting realization that I was actually here, and that actually being here would mean actually having to walk up to strangers and start speaking, Dave was my first test. I couldn't help but feel like it was now or 3 days of never. Within minutes, I'd already admitted my belief in the globe and agreed to a TikTok live interview at the conference center. Dave was soon whisked away by the van that perpetually shuttled between the airport, the Super 8, and the conference. But our plan was set. I returned to my room with self-satisfied optimism. The drive from the Super 8 to Quartzsite Improvement Association, the community center hosting International Truth Expo, was disorienting. Quartzsite sits at the intersection of U.S. Route 95 and Interstate 10, a temporary refuge for truckers and an RV harbor for tourists. Most of the buildings I passed were gas stations with fast food joints attached. Of the dusty lots between the stations, the most notable was the Mega RV Park, with its tiny cartoon logo of Donald Trump and dark glasses. I don't remember seeing houses. In the Quartzsite Improvement Association's dusty lot, decked-out vans and pickups were starting to gather. The building's exterior is wrapped in a mural of its own surroundings. Brown hills, blue skies, cacti. As I entered the main hall, Carol greeted me with a hug and a name tag. She said, "Just take your time, have a look around." To my right was a check-in station, an arrangement of folding tables covered in black, stretchy fabric. A wicker basket on the nearest held ticket holder name tags, and the next had the gift bags for those of us who'd paid the VIP status. Check-in also boasted raffles. The first was a merch array. I love Quartzsite keychains, a flat earth keychain, a scroll, an unscented butter bar, 2 bottles of unknown liquid, 3 t-shirts, and 3 books, including Eat Like Jesus. The second was a beautifully crafted flat earth model, complete with dimmers to illuminate the sun and the moon. It was the last model created by Pontius, a much-beloved artist who didn't have the means to pursue such intricate works anymore. Off to the side, there were several plastic storage bins, cardboard boxes, and a packaged inflatable pool. The mostly unused corner opposite featured a "Thank You Katy Perry" poster, which conference goers could sign. It was inspired by the pop star's Bezos-funded trip to space, which, if you ask her, was totally empowering because all the crew members were women. Flanking the hall, angled outward to encourage interaction, were presenter booths. Preparation levels varied booth to booth. Some were nearly empty, others were piled with models, goods, and measuring devices. Dave's was particularly impressive, stacked with t-shirts and stickers and adorned with the banner for the Flat Earth Sun, Moon, and Zodiac Clock app. Tucked into the wall to my left, which, like all the walls, was plastered with conspiracy signage, was the hallway that led to the cafeteria and bathrooms. In the back half of the presentation space, blue-purple spotlights faced the stage. Every chair everywhere was foldable. Mark and DJ had since arrived, and in an act of kindness that kept me grounded for the remainder of the weekend, offered me a spot at the Strange World booth to serve as home base. Mark wore a fringed Western coat that could be raffled the following evening. He told us he'd worn it for the entirety of his journey from Whidbey, drawing much attention from female TSA agents and passengers. There was an awkward stretch of time before the other panelists and attendees arrived, during which I circled, reading and rereading each panelist's blurb. By the time Dave pulled me outside for our interview, a crowd was building. He re-explained to his TikTok audience who I was and how I'd answered his initial questions, then turned back to me. He asked a question I would hear several times over the course of the weekend. What's your best evidence for the globe? It was not a question I had an answer to. I had intentionally avoided coming up with one in advance. I knew well enough that there was no single piece of globe proof that flat earthers lacked counters for, and the whole point of being at the conference was to listen about debate. I told Dave as much, but he kept going through the motions of what I assume are his standard interactions. If I didn't know any proofs, he said, wasn't my belief in the globe an act of blind faith? Yes. So then it's just a religion. Yeah. But isn't that a problem if it isn't the truth? Well, I guess I don't really believe in truth. I wasn't answering Dave questions the way I was supposed to, and after assessing my susceptibility through a series of non-Earth-shaped subjects, secret math, Santa Claus, the myth of overpopulation, he seemed to give up on getting me to do anything other than burble affirmatives and deny the existence of objective reality. He passed me off to someone else who also brought up truth. Eventually, Dave came back, wrapped things up, and as he unclipped my microphone, I had the disorienting sense that in an unconventional way, I had just been flat-smacked, the term for when Globers are crushed in flat Earth debates. Dave must have thought so too, because he uploaded our 18 minutes to YouTube with the title, "Student Admits Globe Earth Belief is a Religion," barring one that says I could live a good life as long as I reject the independent woman route of despair. The comments are mostly kind. The next 2 hours, according to my recordings, did not occur as I remember them. There's downtime. There are slower conversations, return to home base I don't recall. What I remember is an interpersonal whirlwind. I met JT, a patient father with a slow, steady voice who said, "The truth isn't more important to me than connecting with other human beings." Joe Hanvey, an Earth modelist, who told me, "We're all gifted at something, and his is figuring out how things work." Angels of Light, who had flown there from Australia. Jeff, whose conspiracy journey started with 9/11. Gene, who told me about the healing frequency of a cat's purr and his son's old football coach and his aspirations for farming anarchy, and not chaos anarchy. To grow a garden is a lifetime thing. Then Pixie, who drove a caravan called Hippie's Palace and used to run community events called Pixie Picnics. And dogs. Nathan Thompson's giant hound Geo in a golf cart. A husky with its snout poked out from beneath a table. Rosie, who circled behind her owner's chair so I could pat her head. As the first presentation began, I chose a spot distant from the live stream camera aimed down at the center aisle. The stage was rigged pretty well, a projection screen for slideshows, a podium for laptops, speakers, microphones, tripods, and a dedicated sound guy. Sadly, none of these elements helped me understand what followed. The presenter warned us in advance he would be throwing a lot of information our way. Military science and geometric validation, points of reference, and right-angle depth. He had a background in defense contracting, and he'd performed no fewer than 133 geometric tests on the shape of the Earth. Flat Earth had passed them all. The globe, on the other hand, had a 56% failure rate. If we had questions, he suggested that we photograph the pertinent slide and ask them afterward. To my credit, I understood the first 10 minutes. I passed high school geometry. I kind of understood how right triangles work. The sun is like a lollipop over Earth. Not literally, DJ whispered. And with this right angle and that right angle of sunlight, we can measure sun height to determine Earth's shape. Scientists would concur if they could manage to hear the information. Modern education is regurgitation, though, so they'll never accept his conclusions. But there was still another 60 minutes left, during which I completely lost the plot. The 45-degree angles also mattered somehow, as did vertical angles and squares, which were 10 degrees, and something about alternation and correspondence. With the proper devices, it's obvious, and I wondered why certain shoes on certain floor types make my feet hurt more than others. When an older couple stood up to leave, I ducked into their silhouette and snuck off to check my phone without judgment in the bathroom. In the stall, circling a plea for the proper disposal of feminine hygiene products were posters that mapped food groups into the pH spectrum, displaying John 15:13 against images of doves, and explained top 7 secret facts, including God's real name, Yah. As the presentation ended, I returned to the Strange World booth and voiced frustration with myself. I really wanted to get it, I told Mark and DJ, but I was simply incapable of processing the presented information. But isn't this what you're there to get? Tom would later write in his notes on his recording, sandwiched between the questions, did he say aloe vera spray mist? And why embody traditional science at all? It's a lot of math, DJ sympathized. Mark launched into an exclamation of the importance of ex-military flat earthers, especially those with scientific knowledge, how they lend credibility to the broader movement. But no, most people weren't absorbing the detailed mechanics of the Mark's device. I decided this explanation was permission enough to opt out of most of the remaining presentations. Alone at home base, I was approached by a woman with blue hair, a feathered cowboy hat, and a handgun in her leather tool belt. "You're Amy," she informed me. "I saw you in a video." "Oh?" I responded, dazzled by her accessories and disoriented by her certainty. "No, I'm not." Amy Elohim, a self-proclaimed master herbalist who sells cleansing supplements and promotes nature's cure over doctor's appointments, had already caused me confusion. She was supposed to be a panelist, but Mark had informed me earlier that some sort of foot injury precluded her attendance. Somehow I thought he was referring to my planned +1, who had also had an A name, an affinity for herbal oils, and a fractured foot that prevented travel. He wasn't, but the similarities to Amy's situation didn't end there. I also looked like her. I explained to the woman, Mia, who I really was, and she responded with a now familiar refrain. You're the one they were talking about." Mia lived not too far from Quartzsite, on a farm where her family raised ducks, quails, chickens, and geese. Her truck had a bullhorn attachment I could definitely see. She'd left California because of earthquakes, and she sympathized with my concern about Washington's seemingly lack of preparedness for an eruption of Mount St. Helens. She asked if she could call me Nash, which I accepted. When she announced that she was off to the bathroom, I was pretty sure I'd made my first conference-specific friend. My second was made in the lunchroom shortly after, where I once again made the decision to sacrifice, I don't even want to pronounce that word, in the name of a turkey sandwich. I sat with Joe, whose hair and piercings reminded me of home. His demeanor was a welcome reprieve from the morning's more high-energy, proof-centric interviewees. We talked quietly about our jobs, his long-term hopes, and anarchy. He leaned libertarian, but agreed that the way flat earthers looked out for each other was not unlike the leftist mutual aid networks I was familiar with. He'd traveled around the country attending anarchist and free state festivals, and in the end, he just wanted to be around like-minded people. "I'm going to step outside," I said 200,000 times over the next 90 minutes, thwarted each time. There were people I needed to meet, pictures to take, books I had to read. By mid-afternoon, I'd hit a wall. I was making vague gestures instead of asking questions. When I finally slipped away, I spent an hour behind the building, staring into traffic cones. A mural taunted me with the unfindable mining structures and ballooning. The Strange World presentation offered a restful transition back into conference space. Mark and DJ, attuned to their audience, chose not to display a slideshow and went straight to open Q&A. Joe came and sat next to me, asked about my best globe evidence, and accepted that I didn't have any. Neither of us was inclined to join the Q&A, but we perused my tiny notebook for possibilities anyway. We landed on, if truth was a color, what would it be? And discussed our answers in hushed tones. His was gold or maybe white. I can't remember mine. At the end, I checked my phone to find a Canvas notification from a professor, a reminder of home, so stark it seemed to make the sky brighter. It all felt impossibly long. Naomi, Mia's 10-year-old daughter, approached the Strange World booth and started drawing an orca on the banner we were all invited to sign. Soon, we were chatting about drawing, about animals, about how she was liking the conference. It was a little boring, but she got to camp with her siblings, which was awesome. By dinner, Mark was calling her my foster daughter. I abandoned all other responsibilities. Naomi asked about my favorite movies, whether or not I played Minecraft, and if I knew her favorite game on Roblox. I did not, but that was okay. I should find her username later, and we could play together. Naomi made everything better. We wandered and kept wandering. I wasn't quite as tired. At the cafeteria, the lead volunteer told us she hadn't told the others what the event was, and that some were disgruntled. She came from a scientific background, so she was skeptical about some of the information being presented. But she thought the panelists seemed knowledgeable and that they were questioning things that ought to be questioned. She would have liked to have attended the event if she wasn't working on it. Eventually, Naomi asked if I had anything to cure her boredom, which gave me the chance to produce the strangest item on my packing list: a Rubik's Cube. I'd been bringing it everywhere as something to do with my hands, but interviewing at the International Truth Expo doesn't lend itself to fidget. The problem with the Rubik's Cubes, though, is that you can't really learn to solve them unless you study tutorials and spend hours repeating sequenced movements until they are memorized. I remembered this after Naomi became determined to solve it on her own. I tried to guide her through the initial steps, warning her that she might not be able to accomplish her goal right away, but she was committed. I let her keep it in her tent overnight, but by morning she'd only succeeded in solving a side by twisting a corner piece. It became a ball for Rosie to fetch with. One yellow square still had teeth marks. Before entering the conference on the second morning, I spent a long time sitting in my rental car, a 2023 Nissan Rogue with a TV-sized touchscreen in the middle of the dashboard, which I found impossible to operate. I don't know why I expected this to be, like, an easy thing for me to do. I'd lamented in a voice memo on my drive out of Phoenix. I'd driven like 3 cars in my life. But by day 2, I'd grown used to the too small movements from reverse to drive, and the smell of cleaning products through air conditioning brought familiar relief. I grumbled into my microphone about Confederate flags lining the streets I had just driven down, to my distaste for certain presenters who had been loud about men trying to become women. As it turns out, by day 2, some of the conference goers had reservations about me too. Despite Mark's assurances that I could record anything and everything, not all the attendees appreciated the lack of advance warning, which in hindsight is fair. I kept the microphone off for most of the day in silent apology, opting for a timeline in a notes app instead. These notes are sparse, mostly covering personal dynamics between the presenters. There was a sovereign citizen who seemed particularly unpopular in the path of my theoretical conversion to flat earthism. Am I conspiracy pilled? I don't know how much of my anxiety was warranted. Mark seemed baffled that I was concerned at all. But there wasn't much he could have said to lessen my paranoia. Conducting interviews felt wrong. Keeping to myself felt wrong. Cutting in to mingle felt wrong. After one particularly disconcerting interaction, I broke away to the furthest corner of the parking lot to call Tom, tripping over my words to outrun tears. As is the solution to most problems, all I really needed was to talk to my friends. Carol let me set up a station with a sign for interviews, and though I didn't conduct any while inside, I was comforted by my bubble. I let Naomi guide me around outside and between vendors to see the wire art she's been working on. By early evening, I had accepted that the feverish excitement of the first morning's interviews would not return, that it had been replaced by familiarity I was happy to settle into. After a group photo, there were dinner plans. Joe and I stood by the Strange World booth, idly discussing psychedelics and 9/11 while we waited for carpool groups to arrange themselves. Once they had, I found myself at Quartzsite's only Indian restaurant, Kohinor Daba. I butchered that one. It's run out of a portable building painted bright red and adorned with strands of Christmas lights. It is the only restaurant I have ever given 5 stars on Google reviews. We returned to Quartzsite Improvement Association to find a bonfire, fit with glow sticks and beer I didn't touch. I conducted more interviews. I cried a lot and watched the stars. To catch my flight, I had to leave for Phoenix by 11. I'd planned to conduct several more interviews during my final hours, but it was never going to happen. So on day 3, I decided to plant elsewhere, at the welcome booth, to talk to Sandra. We'd become familiar over the weekend. She and DJ were close, and he'd paid for both of our dinners on the first night. We talked enough for me to know she was fond of some of the same people I was fond of, but she was often so busy at the welcome booth that we hadn't really had a chance to connect. I developed a sense that there was quite a bit of labor going on behind the scenes, and I wanted to see Sandra in action. It didn't take long. Sandra was at the center of everything helpful. Again and again, we were interrupted by someone who needed her. to help with someone's plane ticket home, to help a quartzsite resident browse booths without an entry fee, to help take pictures for posterity. I was impressed, and I told her so. She shrugged off the compliment. She had 5 daughters, and that made it easy. We spoke long enough to share stories we hadn't told anyone else at the conference, which brought us both to tears. At one point, Naomi stopped by to sell us her wire creations. Sandra purchased one and gifted it to me, along with her card and an instruction to text first if I ever wanted to call. As I made my way out, the gifts continued. Naomi gave me a wire flower and a drawing of an orca breaching at sunset. Carol gave me 2 shirts from Flatoberfest. Mia showed me her truck, which was every bit as spectacular as I'd imagined. I took last-minute pictures, hugged my friends goodbye. I had the sinking, anxious, lovely feeling that I was leaving something special behind, and I cried my way to Phoenix. Next section. What are you waiting for? In 2018, Flat Earth was on top of the world. 4 years earlier, Eric Dubay, an American yoga instructor living in Thailand, published a series of works revitalizing flatness for the internet age, and the movement had been growing ever since. Embraced by new investigators, tinkerers, and prophets, Flat Earth blazed trails across social media. The community's population was well into the hundreds of thousands, and Flat Earth content had garnered millions of views. Mainstream media had no choice but to take notice. The 2018 Flat Earth International Conference was attended by global news outlets, a prominent cognitive scientist and career moron, Logan Paul, all of whom were hungry for content. Its opening night marked the release of Daniel J. Clark's Behind the Curve, an idle documentary that would make its way to Netflix in due course. For 2 days in mid-November, the Crowne Plaza Denver Airport International Convention Center was the focus of the movement's unprecedented growth. But a shadow loomed from earlier in the year. All this attention had made Flat Earth a little too popular for the tastes of a few important people. On July 17th, Juniper Downs, YouTube's global head of public policy and government relations, swore before the House Judiciary Committee that the Flat Earth and other low-quality content would be demoted by YouTube's algorithm. When viewers searched a statement like "the Earth is flat," boxes that provide factual information would appear at the top of their results to promote authoritative content. Ted Deutsch, Democratic representative of Florida's 22nd District, was unimpressed. Your response is to put a box saying, "No, the Earth is not flat." Correct, she said. The censorship only got worse. Flat Earth channels were shadow banned and demonetized, making it harder to find viewers and to continue creating economically viable content. As media attention fizzled and Flat Earthers adjusted to their new normal, disaster struck. In 2020, COVID-19 killed 350,000 people in the United States, and Joe Biden became our 46th president. Both events were highly questioned and contested, and suspicion was concentrated in communities where conspiracies ruled. YouTube implemented aggressive misinformation policies going beyond mere demonetization to the outright removal of videos and channels, promoting suspicion about election results or vaccine effectiveness. With physical gatherings limited by lockdowns, Flat Earthers were losing online spaces, too. By the time Donald Trump was impeached for incitement of the insurrection on January 13, 2021, nonpartisan community building was in ruins. Flat Earth has been closed off and closing in ever since. Having been burned so often for so long from so many directions, it's understandable. But in a community that seeks radical openness and exploratory discourse, it's difficult to reckon with. Where once there was excitement about new media appearances, there's now skepticism. Any interaction with Globers is a potential threat. Flat Earth's most significant public-facing engagement with prominent Globers was a disastrous trip to Antarctica that only fragmented the community further. Relentless belief-confirming aggression from Globers ever since is only adding fuel to fragmentation. The fractures are reflected in the content. Long-standing friendships and collaborations have lasted, but there's a significant lack of genuine contribution. TikToks by randoms and live streams by old-timers have become the rule. There have been website updates and a few new model considerations, but truth be told, Flat Earth's a little stagnant, and I think they know it. With the U.S. government's release of declassified files concerning unidentified anomalous phenomena, aliens, and the nation's semi-quincentennial in 2026, there's talk of some impending significance. But it seems like the movement's waiting for a change to change them. So as far as I can tell, there's little belief that change can come from within. The version of Flat Earth that exists now, with its blend of empiricism and faith, began as a reinvention of ancient Israelite cosmology, a reimagining meant to meet and respond to the popularity of the Newtonian model and the growing cultural value of the sciences. It started in 1838 when 22-year-old Samuel Burley Rowbotham waded into a canal near his utopian socialist commune. He brought a telescope, and he watched a boat row away from him long past the moment curvature should have dropped it below the horizon. Rowbotham made his findings public. First published as a pamphlet and later expanded into a full-length work, Zetetic Astronomy, Earth is Not a Globe, advocated for a pursuit of knowledge based in sensory experience and skeptical inquiry. The approach that led its author to Flat Earth. Roundly dismissed by scientists and lampooned by the Royal Astronomical Society, Rowbotham tried to make hay. He invited would-be hecklers to his lectures, hoping scientists and philosophers would take the bait to debate. For Rowbotham, it was a numbers game. Spectacle is spectacle, and even half its audience mocked him. A packed house meant the other half might be reached. People love to hate, and haters often captivate. So people in the seats means finding converts you may not have found otherwise. He was trying to find people to build with. His efforts paid off. Until his death in 1884, English social activist Lady Elizabeth Blunt founded the Universal Zetetic Society, which sought to confirm scriptural interpretations of the universe through scientific investigation. The society published its own magazine, Earth is Not a Globe Review, and sold it for 2 pence apiece. Blunt published a novel about an aristocratic flat earther leaving her unhappy marriage to spread the truth across Europe. Its pages were interspersed with sheet music for those moments when characters were too overcome with emotion not to break into song. Again, like Rowbotham, Blunt had transformed her belief into gift without concern for reception. By the mid-1950s, public interest in space travel was picking up worldwide. The space race was on the horizon, and Flat Earth was pushed even further to the fringes. Enter Samuel Shenton. Even after being ruthlessly mocked by UK tabloids for his search for fellow flat earthers, he saw no reason to relent. In 1956, he created the International Flat Earth Research Society, IFRS, which attracted enough media attention for him to receive 150 letters a week from members and combatants alike. His faith in a flat earth would not keep him from facing criticism head-on. He wanted to make something, so he made something. Shenton found his successors in Charles Johnson and Marjorie Waugh, who married after meeting in a San Francisco record store and discovering they both believed the globe to be a fiction. The Johnsons produced and distributed 89 issues of Flat Earth News, expanded IFRS membership, and were only stopped by their desert home bursting into flames. Only displacement prevented their outreach. When internet forums rebooted Flat Earth once again, they were subsumed by glober mockery. The faithful and curious voices those pages were meant for were drowned out by the likes of Eric Dubay, Mark Sargent, Matt Boylan, and others created new spaces to engage. And now we're here. These reinventions were shaped by changes in values, changes in communication mediums, changes in technology. And if Flat Earth is to emerge anew once more, we will see our world's changes in whatever form it takes. But the reinventions led by Rowbotham, Blunt, Shenton, and the Johnsons weren't defined by the world beyond their beliefs. They weren't forced into being. They were innovations, hard-fought acts of change. The longevity of any movement is often defined by its willingness to adapt. They grow and move and shift and adjust because people are willing to drive them, to make themselves vulnerable so others can hear and thrive alongside them. Communities flourish because people find ways to embrace difference undeterred. We are mired in a cultural movement cultural moment defined by informational insularity and polarization. But Flat Earth has an opportunity to do what the rest of us have failed to do: overcome the crisis of weaponized belief that plagues contemporary life in the United States. If they're going to do it, though, they need stop waiting for the world to do it for them. They need to get back to the work of conversation with whoever's willing to talk. They need to give unapologetic gifts of thinking differently. They need to know they will be dismissed and show us all they couldn't care less. Next section. Since Kenzie said cult. What's a good synonym for flat? Kenzie, 17, was more than happy to abandon her Spanish homework. I should have been helping with said homework, but since I don't know Spanish, I was keeping a half eye on her while not thinking about Spanish instead. Despite the breaks to send her friends Snapchat videos of her freshly dyed hair, she got it done. Level, maybe? Or horizontal, I asked. Well, horizontal doesn't make any sense. A wall is vertical, and that's flat. She constructed a wall with a purple stained hand to prove it. And that's true, but I'm talking flat as in the earth. This took a moment to register. Oh, right. I was leaning level, but she wasn't done. It's crazy that you just know people in a cult. She must have seen my grimace. Or not. I mean, I don't really know what makes something a cult. I didn't either. Not really, but before I had a chance to say so, she searched. Cult definition. From the Oxford English Dictionary, a relatively small group of people having religious beliefs or practices regarded by others as strange or sinister, or as in exercising excessive control over members. Regarded by others. So, what, a cult is say-so? The definition lacks almost all the elements we really associate with cults: authoritarian leaders, secret rituals, compounds, isolation. Relatively small could mean anything. Strange or sinister, too? The religious elements relegated to parentheses. It seems like cult is just a nothing. Through critical mass alone, any group with any beliefs or practices can be a cult. If enough of us point and say cult, it's cult, which means it's a tool to make objects out of faiths that we object to. Beliefs can't be beliefs if you've been brainwashed. Followers aren't faithful, they can't think for themselves. This makes the task of defending Flat Earth against cult accusations all but impossible. If cult status parameters range from indistinct to arbitrary, any old cult claim will do. Cite a group's distasteful behavior and call it a day. But I'll try anyway. Most people take the presence of a singularly charismatic autocrat as a foregone conclusion. Jim Jones, David Koresh, Flat Earth doesn't have that. Mark sometimes calls himself a Flat Earth cult leader because it's provocative. But he knows he's not. He's surrounded by figureheads and equal influence, and anyone at any time can be a luminary if they grind live streams hard enough. Community figureheads actively discourage other flat earthers from treating them as the only sources of viable information. The entire movement is founded on direct witness and individual research. Any and all leaders of the Flat Earth movement have been subject to pushback, disagreement, and suspicion from their own. There's no mind control here. You'd be hard-pressed to find a group with more internal dissent. People also seem to believe cults share an us versus them mentality, some foundational claim to persecution, that cults insist their in-group holds or has access to specialized knowledge is that the outgroups don't, rendering the outgroups toxic enemies of truth. And yes, that sounds a lot like Flat Earth talking point. It also sounds a lot like progressive experts who cry anti-intellectual when it suits them. It sounds a bit like universities, too. The idea that there's no reason to leave the in-group operates similarly. Flat earthers have been hostile and accusatory towards defectors, sometimes indefensibly so, and defectors are some of the most vocal proponents of flat earth cultness. Again, think of the other side. Wouldn't most believers in the globe say there's no reason to abandon them without falling prey to manipulation? Don't they mock, ostracize, and condemn those who do? The most objectionable accusation leveled at Flat Earth, though, is that it causes isolation from non-believers, friends, family. Maybe it does. But it's not belief in Flat Earth that causes isolation. It's the treatment of Flat Earthers by their opponents. Avoiding aloneness often requires disavowal or belief, or at the very least, a promise to keep their mouths shut about it. Here you go. I looked up to find 10 signs you're probably in a cult. Your leader is above the law, an ultimate authority. The group suppresses skepticism and delegitimizes former members. It's paranoid about the outside world. It relies on shame cycles and thought reform. The group is elitist, has no financial transparency, and performs secret rites. All at once, I could hear vitriolic YouTubers and behind-the-curves condescending scientists, late-night talk show hosts, friends who've condemned me for siding with deniers, Neil deGrasse Tyson. And I can't help but feel that if Flat Earth is a cult, then the globe's a cult too. It just lacks enough pointing and voices and celebrity to make it so. Next section. A Toon and two Daves. 3 if you count Weiss. There's a league of supervillains working against Flat Earth. It's not the US government, it's not a globalist cabal, it's a bunch of guys on YouTube, and they're making a living off of it. Flat Earth has had trolls since its inception, and often by design. When hecklers can heckle from the comfort of their own homes, though, the game changes. There is a genre of YouTubers that will henceforth be referred to as science guys, influencers whose content revolves around debunking conspiracy theories and any thought that runs counter to established science. While moon landing deniers and vaccine skeptics are frequent targets, there is no theorist more disposed to evidence-based takedown than the flat earther. There are hundreds and hundreds of these videos, all smugly repeating the same globe proofs while touting scientific authority. It is difficult to imagine being entertained by any of it, regardless of your position on the Earth's shape. But people are entertained. These flat Earth attack videos have vastly higher view counts than the works of flat earthers themselves. Dave Weiss and Mark Sargent's reaction to the Artemis II landing, for example, has 19,000 views. When Sci-Man Dan, a science guy who makes all but daily flat Earth takedown videos, posts his reaction to their reaction and titled it, "Two Flat Earthers Get Super Triggered Over the Moon Mission Coming Back to Earth," he received 443,000 views. Its commenters call Dave and Mark ridiculous, irritating, pathetic, embarrassing, horrible, arrogant, annoying, and worthy of mental institutionalization, to quote a few. While YouTube's censorship of pro-Flat Earth content is likely responsible for a portion of the viewing gap, there is a different and much larger audience being drawn in. In this sense, the science guys may be more akin to panderers than supervillains. They're just responding to their audience's desire for easy targets. But any science guy who claims to serve the public good by defending the achievements of the scientific establishment is simply posturing. Judging by the view counts of their non-Flat Earth content, their audiences aren't interested in learning anything. They're just there for sport. Most of the science guys have given up on pro-science content entirely because anti-science content gets so much more return on their investment. They know predation pays. Dave McKeegan is a photographer, not a scientist, but he's a science guy all the same. 3 years ago, he was making videos about camera equipment, lens comparisons, light stand reviews, electronic shutter warnings. But then he made Photographer Examines If NASA Moon Photos Are Fake. His audience exploded. What follows feels like watching a paradigm shift in process. Photography post, 9,700 views. Moon landing, 197,000 views. Photography, 6,000 and 12,000. Moon landing, 111,000 and 117,000. Photography, 7,900 and 11,000. Then 924,000 and 1.4 million views, respectively. Flat Earth argument that disproves Flat Earth theory and how to silence a Flat Earther. A less than scientific revolution was underway. That said, McKeegan is perhaps the least hated science guy among flat earthers, and for good reason. He rarely participates in live debates, and his photography knowledge is a welcome addition to the repetitive ridicule of standard takedown fare. He seems to go out of his way to debunk the parts of conspiracy theories that don't have obvious counterarguments. He speaks calmly and kindly with Rusty, his Springer Spaniel, splayed on his lap. Without so much as a whiff of McKeegan's quaintness, science guy McToon, otherwise known as MC Toon, is a proper supervillain. He hosts multi-hour live streams, gleefully bullying flat earthers, and has no qualms singling out specific thinkers for derision. Dave Weiss chief among them. In one instance, Toon and his comrade Fight the Flat Earth put together a fake podcast, invited Weiss to be their guest, and played the friendly host for about an hour, only to turn their cameras on to reveal he'd been duped by his longtime nemesis. Real Lex Luthor stuff. In another stream, Toon reads aloud a flat earther's custody documents to accuse him to failure of paying child support. It's disgusting. Somewhere between McKeegan and Toon on the science guy spectrum is Dave Farina of Professor Dave Explains. He still makes educational content, but because it suffers the same fate as McKeegan's, Farina caters his work to view count and goes out of his way to say so. He's got mouths to feed, and despite his growing disinterest in flat earth antics, a quick reaction video is a guaranteed success. In an ecosystem where bullshitters are the keystone species, his forthrightness is commendable, but it makes his righteousness feel performative and cheap. Not least because he doesn't shy away from using the same kind of language as commenters do. His titles are rife with it. Clueless, pointless, wiener, brain dead. Wiener, pointless whiner. Oh boy. Butchered that one. Sorry, guys. The videos themselves provide scientific content, but only as a mean of propping up expletive-filled rants decrying his opponent's foolishness. And he doesn't limit vitriol to the content of his titles. When he receives negative feedback, he snaps back in response, then responds to their responses, and then keeps responding until the naysayer gives up. Clearly, there's something beyond scientific rigor that he's fighting for. He's not attacking the ideas, he's attacking the people. Farina sees science denial and its deniers as imminent threats to the world at large. He identifies as a science communicator, not a scientist, and his goal is to increase scientific literacy. In his view, anti-vaxxers are responsible for needless death. Climate change deniers allow forests to burn and oceans to rise. When they defund research, science deniers in the executive branch aid and abet their citizens' suffering, because any form of science denial can so quickly slip into harm. Deplatforming anyone spreading these ideas is a moral imperative. By stripping them of credibility through ridicule, Farina is saving malleable minds from being manipulated by grifters. That really doesn't work for Flat Earth. As a belief, it isn't contingent upon harm at all. In fact, one of the most common arguments against Flat Earth, albeit a lazy one, is that the shape of the Earth matters so little day to day that there's no reason for the powers that be to hide it. Flat Earth's not a gateway belief either. To reach Flat Earth, you have to become so jaded towards so many scientific institutions that avoiding exposure to vaccine skepticism or climate change denial along the way is impossible. The only way to justify this level of attack on Flat Earth is by believing that the rejection of scientific consensus is immoral on principle, regardless of its fallout. But sciences, however, thrive on refutation. Scientific knowledge is reached and communicated by people, ones with histories and biases and pre-existing frameworks of practice that influence, if not determine, discoveries. The idea that current research is undeniable or that consensus is unquestionable only acts as a shield to protect the harm that arises from it. Race science and are treated with objective truth until the mid-20th century. In the name of bettering the lives of indigenous peoples, science was used to justify imperialist and colonialist violences. The U.S. Supreme Court, in a decision it never expressly overturned, relied on the cutting-edge science of eugenics to permit compulsory sterilization of anyone identified as intellectually disabled. Today, scientific research limits transgender healthcare on the basis of biological sex, but it'd be ridiculous to condemn the sciences as knowledge-building disciplines because they're used in this way. And the same holds true for the condemnation of beliefs that run counter to scientific consensus. Unfortunately, flat earthers are as dedicated as the science guys to defending universal truths, which makes debates between the two strangely evidenceless affairs. Despite their mutual reliance upon faith, flat earthers and science guys live in different material realities. One side relies on intelligent creation, the other on lab coat veneration. Neither side admits the validity of the other's existence, so it devolves. Logical fallacies peppered with indignities, filmed through fuzzy webcams, formality forsaken. It's all heated yet aimless farce. For the science guys, these debates are just another vehicle for humiliation. For flat earthers, the game is the game. In true Robotham fashion, they see themselves as tools to stem the tide. The problem is that no one here is compelling. There's no way they could be compelling. There's no benefit for argumentation. Since most of us viewers and participants alike treat the Earth's shape as fact, these debates are exercises in fortification, not persuasion. Their comments affirm this. No matter how debates unfold, your figurehead won. They have nothing to do with exhibiting or proving truth. They're about deploying as many rhetorical appeals and devices as possible without them ever becoming rhetoric. Rhetoric, though, is what they need, not just because that's what debate is, but because it's what science is too. Science verification relies on consensus, soundness of logic, and replicability of experimental matter. But consensus isn't reached through scientific integrity. It's reached through persuasion, and persuasion requires an intimate knowledge of and identification with the other. Persuasion is a means of solidarity. It's tempting to say that the science guys' divisive non-rhetoric is a fundamental shortcoming. That's when they make their flat earth takedowns. When they make their flat earth takedowns, they fail to combat flat earth because they take their facts for granted and refuse to accept flat earthers as part of their audiences. But they're doing it on purpose. They don't want to persuade flat earthers out of their beliefs. They need flat earthers. There's no spectacle without them. Without the science guys, the flat earthers are still a community fighting the powers that be. Without flat earthers, the science guys, lonely in their lairs, are nothing at all. Next section. Cut them out and renounce. In a fractious and unstable world, it's nice to imagine there is someone to blame, someone detached from you, but with control, someone who might be destroyed someday. If that someone's a minority, it's even nicer. You don't even have to disrupt the status quo to fight them. You can punch down and imagine you're punching up. Nations have been built from such punches. For early Christian societies in Western Europe, Jewish people were frequent targets of unfounded blame. They were responsible for Christ's crucifixion. They poisoned wells with bubonic plague to destroy Christendom. Their prowess in usury and commerce wasn't a result of legal restrictions on their livelihoods, but rather an innate financial vampirism. Through satanic rituals, they murdered children for blood to bake matzah. The accumulation and mutation of these narratives across centuries and continents has resulted in what is often referred to as international Jewish conspiracy. One of the most instrumental contrivances of the formalization of the conspiracy was the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Published in Russia in 1903, the Protocols collects the fraudulent minutes from a gathering of the fictional Elders of Zion, an elite cabal of Zionist Jews hell-bent on world domination. With direct evidence secreted from Jewish leaders, the Protocols validated long-standing anti-Semitic tropes. It spread quickly and with abandon. It's difficult to overstate the influence of the Protocols on the popularization of mainstream anti-Semitism in the United States and elsewhere. Within 17 years of its publication, a figure as visible and revered as Henry Ford, yes, that Henry Ford, published an English translation of the Protocols in a print run of 500,000, while also rehashing its arguments to produce his 4-volume The International Jew, the World's Foremost Problem. Over time, distortions of the stereotypes found in the Protocols became hallmarks of white nationalist rhetoric. Jews were made responsible for 9/11, the porn industry, COVID-19, and Hollywood exploitation. In the 21st century, it's difficult to find conspiracy theories that don't depend on some form of anti-Semitism. One of them, however, is flat Earth. Rowbotham's Synthetic Astronomy, the most important work of Flat Earth's 19th century revival, condemned the globe model for contradicting both Christian and Jewish texts. Early Flat Earthers didn't tie their model to specific conspiracies or peoples at all. They just thought the science was wrong. As the world moved forward, though, the technological gains were made, the proliferation of globe evidence had to be accounted for, the sheer volume of NASA imagery. If it does not prove a globe, could only be a byproduct of coordinated lies. It could only result from orchestrated deception conducted by networks of inordinate power. If our perception of both cosmology and the physical world is within their control, our perception of everything else is too. With that kind of power, any conspiracy could be true. Flat Earth, in this sense, has a circular recruiting mechanism that can bring nastiness to bear. If you begin in biblical cosmology, belief in a flat Earth can expose you to any number of other conspiracies. If you start from an unrelated conspiracy theory, you can find your way to flatness. The former route rarely problematizes flat Earth belief, but the latter allows it to get swallowed by the biases and baggages of any conspiracy that predates it in the believer. In that moment of consumption, centuries of anti-Semitism can worm its way in, as it did with the work of Eric Dubé. Dubé's 200 Proofs Earth is Not a Spinning Ball, which kickstarted Flat Earth's internet-based renaissance, lifts most of its evidence from Rowbotham. It accommodates satellites and the like, but for the first 190 proofs, it's familiar terrain. Sundials, lighthouses, ship hulls, tides. But in proof 191, Dubé starts disarticulating the globe conspiracy. He claims that the founding fathers of the spinning ball mythos, from Copernicus to Buzz Aldrin, have all been Freemasons participating in worldwide deception. Dubé doesn't mention it, but it's no secret that the protocols, like Mein Kampf after it, identified the Freemasons as tools of Jewish dominion. In Proof 197, he describes the indoctrination of the masses into globe belief as an effort to cultivate absolute faith in materiality, superficiality, status, selfishness, hedonism, and consumerism. Then in Proof 198, he makes direct reference to the protocols alongside anti-Semitic propaganda from 1941. Given the circuitous and ungainly nature of the text, there's a way in which these moments of bigotry might go unnoticed by someone encountering Flat Earth for the first time. Not to worry, the unsubtle Dubé makes his beliefs about the Jewish people unequivocal elsewhere. In one blog post, he writes, Hitler was beloved by his people. He wanted nothing but peace and never ordered the extermination of a single Jew. The largely Jewish-controlled mainstream media has ever since painted an evil picture of Hitler, and the Jew world order has even enacted laws in 16 European countries prohibiting free speech on the issues of Judaism, Hitler, and the Holocaust. The lyrics to one of his many songs reads, "The earth's fucking flat, Holocaust denied. Hitler was cool and not a bad guy. Talmudic Jews have control of your mind. If you think it's all appalling satire, watch his nearly 4-hour documentary, Hitler versus the Jew World Order, to find it otherwise." The majority of flat earthers are, of course, not anti-Semites. Mark tells me that Dubé's current audience is conspicuously detached from the community, describing them with a series of adjectives that all equate to crazed. When he trailed off in search of a noun, I supplied Nazis. He didn't disagree. Flat earthers do not want to be associated with bigotry. They don't participate in, and many resent Dubé and others like him for misrepresenting their community. The only allusion to anti-Jewish sentiment I heard at the International Truth Expo was at the tail end of an anecdote about a disruptive anti-Semitic man who was either asked to leave or compelled to quiet down in a space that provided attendees a rare occasion to share the beliefs without fear of judgment. Every testimony I heard was rooted in love. Enough time spent in online flat earth spaces, however, will reveal a troubling normalization of Dubé's language. The Holocaust-denying blog posts and pro-Hitler rap albums should have wiped Dubé off the map, and yet his role in reigniting flat earth interest means he's still spoken of like a hero of old, the inspiration for thousands in pursuit of flat earth enlightenment. Maybe this could be excused if his more horrific beliefs were not still in circulation. High school textbooks are riddled with historical figures who harbored problematic beliefs, but we find ways to address them. To interrogate, for example, their roles in shaping contemporary inequalities. The same cannot be said for the flat earth community and anti-Semitism. Flat earthers aren't resistant to criticizing their figureheads, but there's never been a reckoning either. Consider Austin Whitsitt, a visible and vocal flat earth content creator. If you Google Whitsitt's name, you'll find several takedown pages constructed by science guy McToon and his supporters, each of which outline a series of transgressions that are better kept private. Toon's work infuriates flat earthers, yet no one seems to take umbrage with Whitsitt's participation in virtual roundtables like White Families, White Nation, or that he titles his live stream things like The Jewish Lie That Fooled the World. They don't seem to mind his raps about Israel's global control. In one of Whitsitt's live streams, he wears a black mesh button-up surrounded by moody LED strips. Jewish conspiracy is obviously like a major issue, he says in the cadence of Love Island contestant. In a moment of theoretical apologies for his over-encompassing language, he describes people who use Jewishness as a scapegoat for all their problems as hella gay. He then goes on to take Jewish control of banks and pornography as givens. He spends 2 hours breaking down Albert Einstein's supposed degeneracy, rejecting the theory of relativity, and denying the Holocaust. When flat earthers argue about whether Whitsitt is trustworthy, none of this behavior is cited. He's seen as a valuable member of the team, an expert debater, a father who's been through the ringer. The only harm he's caused? The potential damage of his newfound belief in the 24-hour sun. Anti-Semitism even flies under the radar in critical depictions of flat Earth. Mark tells me that Dubé was slated to appear in Behind the Curve, the documentary that caused flat Earth relevance to skyrocket. When producers discovered his anti-Semitic content, they delivered an ultimatum: swear off the distasteful beliefs or be erased from the film. Dubé opted for erasure, but the filmmaker's choice to omit his story altogether, regardless of his physical presence, is telling. It suggests a desire for inoffensive eccentrics, for lovable naivete that scientists can snobbishly but politely denounce. In one of the documentary's most memorable moments, Nathan Thompson reads from the table of contents to Edward Hendry's The Greatest Lie on Earth, proof that our world is not a moving globe, while driving both hands off the wheel. I can't help but wonder if producers knew the book featured lines like ritual murder is the dark satanic secret of Judaism, and Zionist Jews have created all manner of antichrist philosophies designed to propagandize and enslave the masses, before choosing to include that scene in the final cut. The casual sweeping under the rug of hate speech from both within and without is my primary concern for the flat earth community. Because again, most flat earthers don't subscribe to such harmful beliefs. It's the kind of fringe thought that can occur in any community, and in most communities. Once it's identified, it's publicly condemned. When a guest on a Flat Earth podcast says in passing that it's the Jays had something to do with JFK's assassination, however, no one reacts. Most flat earthers agree that bigotry has no place among them, but one gets the sense that a permissive stance toward this kind of rhetoric is seen as a necessary evil. A fragile community, the thinking goes, can't afford to expel a sizable vocal contingent of their coalition. So the cycle continues, with otherwise well-meaning flat earthers regurgitating neo-Nazi talking points and thinking that they're criticizing elites, all because some asshole they're in community with spouts off about Israel. It's made all the more heartbreaking because it does not have to be this way. The flat earthers I've spoken to made it clear that they don't participate in hate, and they'd wish it wasn't happening at all, but the kind of filth present in their community necessitates stronger reactions from than non-participation. It requires them to avoid platforms and speak out and act against and rebuild. It's not impossible. Even amid the ugliness of anti-Semitic reactions to geopolitical stability, there's still the faintest of faintest glimmers of potential. There's resistance to violence against civilians, unjust war, and governmental obfuscation. Oof. It's just viscerally misguided. It attacks people and not problems. Purged of its discrimination, though, the underlying conscience might expand the coalition instead of shutting people out. Mark believes the presence of anti-Semitism will only worsen now that the United States and Israel are at war with Iran. This is true in Flat Earth and beyond, but again, it does not have to be. Imagine for a moment the power of a movement that says it opposes without indulging in bigotry, that allows for diversity of belief without platforming hatred. A movement so staunchly anti-establishment that it rejects the foundations of our shared knowledge to reimagine coexistence. It's a community that can exist, but not if it refuses to spurn members who condemn millions of people and deny the murders of millions more. Not if it promotes blame over supporting those impacted by violence. I do not believe Flat Earth is irreversibly tied to hatred, but someone has to start untying the knot. Next section. It happens here too. Relishing the success of their now trademark dismissals of religion as public evil, the four horsemen of the new atheism, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, and Daniel Dennett, sit around a table bragging about offending the faithful. Whoever is behind the camera hasn't accounted for sunlight. Dawkins and Dennett are half composed of garish blur, while Harris and Hitchens are clouded by shadow. Untouched martinis take on a dishwater quality. The table itself is inexplicably littered with papers, other beverages, and a tray of pink, shapeless dreck that must have once been food. Their conversation is plagued by a haughty insistence that they've overcome emotion, that it's been systematically extracted from their beliefs. It's shunted to the hiding places of other objectionable concepts like faith and the supernatural. The offense religious people take to being told they've wasted their lives is only further proof of their irrationality. When Christopher Hitchens concedes that he is in fact offended by the idea that people cannot construct a moral system without a divine overlord, Sam Harris, who holds such rational beliefs as Muslim people should be racially profiled in airports and torture is justified if you have the right guy in custody, is quick to question him. But are you really offended by that? Doesn't it just seem wrong to you? Harris does not bother to explain the difference between Hitchens feeling strongly that something is wrong and a religious person feeling strongly that something is wrong. Although, maybe he doesn't need to. Hitchens obviously bases his reactions on empirical morality, which exists, and the faithful simply listen to whatever flim-flammer gets to them first. I want to be furious. It's a testament to the divisive power of coupling judgy eloquence with credentials. But whatever low-grade rage I feel is overwhelmed by dejection. Watching the Four Horsemen's round table is exactly like telling a glober at a party that someone being a flat earther is like fine. There's no magical aspect that makes it altogether different from belief in anything else. It's darker at the parties I go to, too. There's never a cup, can, or bottle that hasn't been touched. When you stop talking, though, their clear indignation is marked by the same horsemanish scoff. They say something like, well, I guess it's fine to live your life guided by misinformation. It's not like they care or anything. It's whatever. The Earth is just factually a globe. Their objection is to anyone being otherwise can possibly be based in something so base as feelings. Next section. What distance doesn't end. It's midnight in Antarctica, and Union Glacier lights a clear sky. Flat earther Jaron Campanella steps into frame, the wind muff of his microphone brushing mild stubble. All right, guys, sometimes you were wrong in this life, and I thought there was no 24-hour sun. In fact, I was pretty sure of it. The footage is being live-streamed to YouTube, and the chat erupts with triumphant messages from globe believers as Campanella concedes that the 24-hour sun is a fact. A flood of W's and respect is interrupted by the occasional shill from flat earthers. The image of Campanella spreads. It's picked up by the New York Post and the Daily Mail. From the outside, it seems like he's sounded the death knell for flat Earth, but the viral headlines have missed a few details. Once introduced to the Flat Earth movement, Will Duffy, the pastor of a small church in Colorado, spent months in search of the truth. A self-proclaimed naturally curious person, Duffy admits that it wasn't the first issue to have kept him up at night. But Flat Earth was different. He couldn't shake it. By the time he emerged from his bout with sleepless research, Duffy was not only more convinced by the globe model, but he had also identified Antarctica's 24-hour sun as the definitive means of disproving claims to the flatness of the Earth. And in February of 2024, Duffy launched a YouTube channel dubbed The Final Experiment, TFE, to settle Earth-shaped debates once and for all. On a globe model, the axial tilt of the Earth means that during the December solstice, the area below 66 degrees is perpetually lit. The phenomenon lasts longer the further south you travel, culminating in 6 consecutive months of daylight at the South Pole. Duffy insisted this wasn't possible on a flat Earth's most popular models, the Gleason and azimuthal equidistant, otherwise known as AE maps. On these designs, Antarctica acts as an elevated ring surrounding the other continents. If the sun circles the Earth from above, it would be difficult for it to illuminate Antarctica endlessly while circling the viewer below. Duffy knew Antarctica had unparalleled potential. He'd seen and cited videos of prominent globers and flat earthers alike calling the 24-hour sun a matchless means of providing globeness. He's attended the debate where both sides claimed Antarctica could determine the shape of the Earth. Through clips from Eric DeBay, Dave Weiss, Austin Whitsitt, and several others, he made the case that no flat earthers believed the 24-hour sun existed. Duffy knew what he had to do. He was going to Antarctica. He would make the polar trip and invite 24 leading flat earthers and 24 globers to join him. He was adamant that their observations would be, in his word, final. It's not hard to be compelled by Duffy's early explanations of the final experiment. He's approachable, articulate, and clear without coming off as too scripted. He's taken pains to ensure every word plays as an act of good faith. He's the kind of guy you want to hear give a sermon. What's more, as difficult it is to imagine an even-handed guide for an end-of-your-worldview expedition, Duffy was a decent candidate. He's deeply familiar with both the flat and globe models, and he'd made videos defending flat Earth against fellow globers. As a young Earth creationist, flat earthers could even feel confident in his willingness to challenge mainstream science. Most of all, he stressed collaboration. Despite being fueled by opposition, the final experiment would not be a battle. It would be a set of explorers united by their drive to discover truth. Flat earthers didn't buy it. To start, any time spent in their circles proves there's not nearly enough agreement about their models to assert universal belief. The fiction of Antarctica's 24-hour sun was a popular opinion, but flat earthers as early as Lady Blunt had made the opposite claim. Even more suspiciously, when globers state a desire to cross divides or engage in reasoned debate, assent tends to result in public and publicized takedowns. It didn't help that Duffy's diehards failed to echo his friendliness. The comment sections of his videos are overrun by globers, and not the kind that extend patience to flatness. The more of Duffy's work you watch, the more you start to notice little rhetorical gestures that seem to wink at their behavior. Don't worry, we'll soon be vindicated. One comment praises the subtle and masterful brilliance of Duffy's handling of TFE. Another refers to flat earthers as shut-ins who haven't developed the social skills to think rationally. Both comments show Duffy's stamp of approval in the shape of a tiny heart. Flat earthers had reason to be wary. Duffy was undeterred. He offered to fully fund a believer from each side of the divide and launched polls to determine whose trips would be comped. Public spectacle and pledged airfare would surely minimize misgivings. The winner of the Globe poll, photography YouTuber turned science guy Dave McKeegan, agreed to make the trip straight away. When Dave Weiss was announced as Flat Earth's winner, though, Duffy's bubble was burst. Weiss responded with an email that reads, in part, "As I said before, I want nothing to do with you. I don't trust you at all. The people you hang out with are demons and liars." Weiss's rejection only fueled the globe-sized righteousness. The longer flat earthers refused to engage with the final experiment, the more vindicated globers felt. Flat earthers were either too insecure in their beliefs to compete, or, worse, too eager to deceive their audiences to hazard defeat. As glober vitriol increased and Duffy's narrative inched ever closer to takedown territory, flat earthers' wariness and aggression towards the project grew too. After Weiss, Duffy's free trip defaulted to Campanella, who had received second place in the poll. After some initial negotiations, Campanella even hosted Duffy on his YouTube channel for an interview, and it went well, really well. Campanella, blunt and confrontational was the perfect foil to Duffy's poise. He started with Duffy's clearest deception. He kept his identity hidden during the initial rollout of TFE. When a podcaster asked if he knew who was behind the project, he claimed ignorance. Duffy responded with an aw shucks appeal. He'd lied to the podcaster in the same way he'd lied to his wife about his plan to propose. He'd hoped to preserve an element of surprise. Campanella responded deadpan, "Well, that's kind of different." Once the foundational concerns had been dealt with, Campanella addressed and subverted misconceptions about both sides in an Earth-type aisle. No, Duffy was not using church donations to fund the trip. He was a successful investor and a former financial advisor. No, Flat Earth's distrust of Duffy wasn't unreasonable. His connection to Michael Toon, a flatness antagonist prone to nasty acts of public debunking, made him suspect. Yes, what Duffy said is true. Campanella and other flat earthers had claimed that a ceaseless Antarctic sun could not exist on their models and therefore couldn't possibly occur. Campanella insisted that he wouldn't stand in the way of a flat reputation. Repudiation. Good Lord. I would never have used that word, but that's fine. Regardless of the risks, the final experiment's in-person witness promised an unprecedented opportunity to force the hands of the elite. They'd never allow their group to see the sunset, but their need to protect the 24-hour lie would leave them vulnerable to exposure. As long as he had a flat Earth compatriot to help forestall his untimely demise, he would travel to Antarctica. Campanella had drawn a line in the sand. Flat earthers could either solve the sun conundrum or concede TFE would yield incontrovertible evidence of the shape of the earth. Things got tense. Some, claiming truth doesn't fear investigation, accepted the challenge. Others insisted that no matter the outcome, TFE's results would be far from definitive. In fact, because the lights in the sky don't tell us anything about the shape of the ground, it wouldn't and couldn't prove anything at all. A third group emerged with a vibrant range of conspiracy claims. Duffy was an agent of Satan or government or both. Anyone who agreed to the trip was a shill or an actor. It would all be faked on a sound stage or maybe in Alaska. The Flat Earth community has always had divisions, but now they were at the forefront of conversation. Live streams and podcasts were awkward, stilted, and their comment sections crammed with long, heated debate threads. Meanwhile, the final experiment itself was picking up speed. Austin Whitsitt agreed to accompany Campanella on the trip as long as Duffy, who had offered up his ticket for Whitsitt's trip, was there too. Conservative political commentator Candace Owens had caught wind of Flat Earth and discussed it in Instagram Live, filmed from her car. Duffy was quick to take advantage of the mainstream coverage. He invited her along and she promoted TFE on her podcast. Their director, Mark Herman, offered to fund another Flat Earth spot. A small globe YouTuber, Critical Think, reached his crowdfunding goal by proposing an array of experiments to conduct on the trip. Science guy Michael Toon, dreaded adversary of both Whitsitt and Flat Earth, started a crowdfund of his own. By September, though, Duffy had a problem. While Campanella and Whitsitt had agreed to go on the trip, neither had made a full commitment. Whitsitt's wife was pregnant. Campanella wouldn't go without Whitsitt, and both were being harassed by the community for even considering TFE. Duffy had a hard deadline for commitment, but even Herman's funding couldn't convince other Flat Earthers to go in their stead. Then Duffy received a message. A mysterious benefactor was willing to foot the bill for another Flat Earther, but not one of Duffy's 24 invitees. Instead, he wanted civilians to apply. If they could prove they'd been in the community for at least 2 years, they were eligible. Thus began the Golden Ticket saga. Duffy received more than 40 applications from across five continents. After selecting the top 10 candidates, he hosted a live stream to decide the winner of his lifetime supply of terrestrial correctness. And if Duffy can do anything, he can spin a good yarn. It was a bewildering who's who of sass, sincerity, and self-importance. There was Trent, a former tennis pro who had previously been featured on the pregnancy-based dating show Labor of Love. Chris, whose YouTube channel was dedicated to the psychological transition. Flat Earthers experienced post-conversion. Jeff, a beleaguered Flat Earther whose belief was used against him in a custody battle. Proper drama for a Zoom room. But Duffy knew he would choose a woman. The flat versus globe space was male-dominated, and the female perspective, he reasoned, would give women at home someone to root for. One by one, he removed nominees from the call until only Cassidy, a young mom with a farmer's market look, and Lisbeth Acosta, a prominent member of a discussion group called Flat Earth Gang, remained. When Lisbeth claimed victory, she screamed. She thanked God, TFE, Will, NASA engineer, Bert Pascal, Flat Earth Gang, her friend Kelsey, her mom, and everyone else. Duffy had chosen her in part because of her work conducting observational experiments along the aforementioned NASA engineer. He felt she was committed to finding truth. The final experiment for her was a mission that would benefit all mankind. Though almost no one, flat or globe, could keep from being oafish about the fact that her youth and beauty reception was overwhelmingly positive. Her audition proved an earnest enthusiasm that had been missing from her previous participants, a reminder of what TFE was supposed to be. 9 days after the golden ticket announcement, Duffy uploaded a video admitting he'd been scammed. The offer was a prank, and none other than a disgruntled Campanella had alerted him of the deceit. Rather than explain why there hadn't been a vetting process, Duffy folded the incident into his ongoing narrative. He knew that flat earthers had been scammed and mocked by the likes of Logan Paul, Jimmy Kimmel, and Tyler Oliveira, and he just couldn't believe they would do the same to him after experiencing such pain. Globers had warned him about the behavior of flat earthers, but alas, he let his optimism get in the way. If Lisbeth really was Duffy's Charlie Bucket, though perhaps the power of community would fund her trip. He started a GoFundMe in her name and pleaded for contributions. In the following days, the scammer revealed himself through an appearance on the Flat Earth Live show under the name Flat Earth Philosopher. He was met with suspicion and bafflement. Most flat earthers hadn't heard of him, nor did they approve of his elaborate scheme. Toon posted an expose after the appearance, revealing through review of Duffy's emails that the same person had sent several fake offers from different addresses. Toon defended Duffy's lack of investigation on the grounds that as a pastor, he wasn't used to interacting with dishonest people or scamming his emails for suspicious behavior. His defense couldn't hide the fact that the emails read like mass texts. Somehow, Duffy escaped complete disaster. Lisbeth's GoFundMe raised over $7,000, and by a stroke of divine luck, an actual benefactor offered to pay the remainder of her costs. Finally, things were going smoothly. Concurrent with the Golden Ticket saga, Campanella and Whitsitt had met Duffy's deadline and committed to the trip. Mark Herman, too, agreed to attend and recruited Jonathan Mariandi, a flat earther and filmmaker, to create a TFE documentary. Then Toom met his crowdfunding goal. Duffy's videos were suddenly dramaless. All he had to do was make it to December, when at long last his intrepid truth crew could make their way to the Punta Arenas, Chile's Antarctic gateway. From the moment the group convened, there were problems. The Globers arrived a day early, sparking paranoia about extra rest or advanced planning. Whitsitt and Campanella were concerned about being filmed by Toon without consent. Months later, Toon would release a 25-minute video of their argument about the consent, filmed in the lobby of Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions headquarters. Whitsitt was also convinced that Toon had dragged his wife and children into the ongoing beef, citing Toon's comments about the Golden Ticket finalist who'd lost his custody battle. Again, Whitsitt could only be partially vindicated. In the aftermath of the trip, Toon reacted live on stream to leaked security footage of a domestic dispute in Whitsitt's home. Whitsitt and Campanella's proposed a new contract, one that would prohibit any expeditioner from filming altogether without explicit consent. Campanella had particular reason to be worried about a hit piece. Behind the Curve had ended on a lingering shot of a failed experiment he conducted, its footage mangled to ensure that he and Flat Earth at large looked as ridiculous as possible. This new contract was a defensive measure, he explained, proposed on behalf of the community. Duffy wasn't having it. They had already signed contracts with a more flexible camera policy, and Jonathan Mariandi was being paid to film the trip. Signing new contracts would render most of his footage unusable if Whitsitt or Campanella withdrew consent on a whim. If the Flat Earthers couldn't accept the terms of the trip this far in, then they could turn around and fly home. If that's what you guys want your legacy to be, that's fine, Duffy snapped. Begrudgingly, the group came to an agreement. No new contracts would be signed, but Toon, if his intent was mockery, would respect requests not to be filmed. The amount of the footage captured between December 12th and December 17th, 2024 is astounding. Most participants had personal live streams running from arrival in Punta Arenas to final departure. Some of the footage leading up to their landing on Union Glacier is interesting. Most of it is not. The setting, though, is striking, even if you're accustomed to watching typical flat or globe content. Gone are the poorly lit live streams filmed from some guy's living room and the slideshows of random diagrams with halting voiceovers. The expeditioners' bundled figures, set against the sloping mountains and endless ice sheets, seemed to bring the world into being. After years of online debate, this was something physical. Regardless of its shape, the Earth was here, prime for exploration. Back home, the footage, interesting or not, was being picked apart frame by frame. Everyone had a theory about TFE fakery, each with its own gate. Green screen gate, drone gate, vape gate, footprint gate, shadow gate. Most theories were debunked upon arrival, often by the expeditioners themselves. Duffy seemed to be keeping close tabs on the audience and set a precedent for no-nonsense debunking after a mistake of his own caused green screen gate. Duffy's typical films are shot from home in front of a green screen, onto which he projects a repeated pattern of both potential Antarctic models on a black background. In his rush to get things up and running in Antarctica, he forgot to turn off his chroma key, the tool that replaces any on-camera green with a desired background. As a result, when Mary Andy stepped into Duffy's shot, the green pocket of his North Face jacket keyed out to display the black and white Antarctica models. The more extreme conspiracists pounced, positing it as proof that the whole expedition was taking place in a studio. Of course, the error specifically proved that there wasn't a green screen. If there had been, we wouldn't see an actual mountain in the background, but Duffy cursed himself for the mistake. Most other fakery theories were likewise disprovable. David Weiss led the charge against Shadowgate, creating shadow phenomena conspiracists said were impossible in his driveway with his wife. DroneGate had nothing to do with a beep from Duffy's drone, but how beeping proves a drone or what it films doesn't exist remains unclear. FootprintGate was a misunderstanding of how snow works. The most widely discussed theory was VapeGate. Early in the trip, viewers noticed that despite freezing conditions, little footage showed visual evidence of the expeditioner's breath. This is explainable. Bright light and low humidity lessen the visibility of vapor, and more shadowy shots show instances of visible exhalation from the crew. One of these instances wasn't just breath. During a live stream in a field of tripods at the center of the camp, Whitsitt closes his laptop and walks into a nearby cabin. When he returns and the live stream resumes, he exhales a cloud of vapor, which shouldn't be possible. He's filming in light that had to this point rendered breath invisible. Internet sleuths figured out the discrepancy from Dave McKeegan's live stream, which tracked the sun from a tripod. From McKeegan's angle, Whitsitt exits the cabin, lifts his hand to his face, inhales from a vape pen, restarts his live stream, and exhales. Once again, conspiracists leapt to conclusions. Surely, Whitsitt faked his visible breath to convince his audience he wasn't on a soundstage, something which couldn't possibly be done with dozens of camera angles, equipment, flight tracking, and eyewitness testimony of everyone at Union Glacier. This should have been a slam dunk debunk, but Whitsitt was oddly cagey about it. He claimed that it was the warmth of the cabin that had condensed his breath, which inflamed conspiracists. Under pressure, he conceded that yes, he had been vaping, but not to attempt deception. He just vapes. Other expeditioners kindly tiptoe around why he hadn't fessed up from the outset, but Toon is not beholden to arbitrary politeness. He didn't want somebody to know he was vaping. That's between him and somebody else. The hours leading up to midnight dulled any suspense about the results of the experiments. In his first live stream after landing, Campanella noted the sun was quite a bit higher in the sky than he expected. When he and Whitsitt questioned the employees at Union Glacier, they confirmed the sun always stayed above the horizon. Later, Whitsitt would admit that he had known they would see the midnight sun from the time their plane left Punta Arenas. When midnight struck, Duffy couldn't resist starting a live stream with a 17-minute diatribe about the wrongness of his doubters, whipping the camera to face the sun. It was positioned due south at just the angle he'd predicted, well above the horizon. He'd stepped aside, inviting each of his fellow participants to enter the stream to describe what the experience meant to them. It's one of the only moments when it seems like Duffy might have accomplished his goal of unity. Mark Herman stepped up first. This is an incredible place, and these are incredible people. He said, I've seen so much camaraderie and teamwork between people, and I think that's a huge thing that has really moved me. Critical Think, McKeegan, and Toon affirmed the overwhelming beauty of the scenery, the success of their other experiments, and their gratitude for the opportunity. Campanella was the first flat earther to speak. He explained his new perspective, but made a point not to rule out flat Earth. To me, it means the AE map no longer works. But that doesn't mean that I'm right. It doesn't mean flat Earth is over. Maybe somebody's got the answer. I don't have the answer right now. Then leaves Beth, radiating joy. If there was any doubt about a creator, this would put it to rest. There's no way that we're not in a created place. I don't care what anybody says. She was especially grateful for the friendships she'd formed over the course of the trip. Whitsitt concurred. It's a testament to the idea that we're all just humans, and whether you know it or not, there was a creator, and he made you and all of us. And when there's not all this hoo-ha on the internet, that kind of becomes pretty self-evident in person. Mary Andy wrapped up the testimonies with a sheepish admission that while he wished the sun had set, he knew the group's journey, physical and relational, was a story that needed telling. Duffy took the camera back, signed off with a shout-out to his wife and children, reaffirmed that their observations falsified existing flat Earth maps, and celebrated the group's dedication to truth. After nearly a year, the final experiment was complete. Any sense of unity the group had cultivated vanished upon return. Media tours commenced. Mainstream outlets, driven by Campanella's supposed disavowal of flat Earth, interviewed Duffy. Participants flocked to Zoom-based podcasts. Globers focused on the falsification of the AE map, and flat earthers defended themselves against accusations of selling out their community. Toon streamed hours upon hours of himself mocking Whitsitt's testimony of the trip. While the Globers paraded proofs and chastised non-believers, there was an uneasiness building in the flat Earth community. None of the four flat earthers had explicitly denounced the theory after seeing the sun, but they did appear to be wavering, Campanella especially. The most viewed episode of Strange World to this day, Nothing Gate, features Weiss and Whitsitt debunking further conspiracies about Antarctica while also reassuring the audience that Campanella hadn't defected. He was just adjusting, they said, to a different version of the flat Earth model. It wasn't true. Campanella may not have made an immediate departure, but he was well on his way. On Christmas Eve, he streamed for nearly 3 hours, lambasting the community's treatment of the flat Earth expeditioners. He read a poem set to the rhythm of A Visit from St. Nicholas, commonly known as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, with lines like, "Ignore my issues, we have no model, no clue, it's flat whether or not you believe in it, just make sure you do." The poem increases in intensity, targeting specific theories used against him, and spirals into attacks on his fellow flat Earth content creators. Beyond the interpersonal conflicts, Campanella had problems with the trajectory of the flat Earth movement as a whole. And behind the curve, his title was The Experimenter. He was dedicated to physical modeling, to tinkering and retinkering until a statement was proven. His recent downturn in experimentation and exploration in favor of long-winded live streams and TikTok plagiarism was indicative for him of the movement's impending doom. What a gross group of people we've become. How does anyone feel like this is the same flat Earth group that was here in 2015, 16, and 17? It's nothing anywhere close. I used to think that the flat Earth made you a better person. It makes you a terrible person. He hadn't departed the community or denounced flat Earth as a theory, but it was coming. On January 10th, 2025, in a 6-hour live stream, Campanella furiously debunked classic flat Earth proofs, classified the community as a cult, and cut ties with anyone involved. Despite his 10 years as a dedicated flat earther, he seemed to have had little sympathy for remaining believers. His mantra became, "It's okay to change your mind," which would be admirable had it not been for the viciousness of which he spoke about those who hadn't. He was on a full anti-flat earth rampage, collaborating with Toon on several hour takedowns of anyone who spoke against him. He was flat earth's first significant turncoat, but he wouldn't be the last. For the next 6 weeks, flat earth worked to pull itself back together. Campanella was shunned, condemned, left to associate with the people he'd once battled. Witz had attempted further damage control podcast appearances before fading into the background of the community. Lisbeth maintained her flat earth belief, but didn't seem interested in capitalizing on her newfound exposure. Mariani disappeared to work through his footage. Duffy, on the other hand, went mask off. The final experiment hadn't been final, and he was as bitter could be. Without a reason to hide his disgust with flat earth and its believers, his smugness during debates became shameless. Just when things might have returned to normal after all, Glober mockery was old hat to flat earth, there was another betrayal. After celebrating its 500th episode, which Mark still maintains is his best, Strange World 501 opened with an announcement. Lisbeth would be replacing Patricia Steer as a co-host, and Patricia was leaving Flat Earth for good. Here and elsewhere, I've avoided discussing Patricia Steer. She was subjected to indefensible treatment in the wake of her defection, and I've chosen to respect her privacy by not reaching out. But here, she's crucial to the story. Patricia had many reasons to leave Flat Earth, and had stepped away before. She, like Mark and Campanella, had been called a shill after appearing in Behind the Curve. She was accused of being secretly transgender. In perhaps the most disgusting moment in the community's history, she'd been sexually assaulted by another flat earther and shunned for speaking up. It was only in the last year that she'd rejoined the community. This time, her departure was documented. She'd been watching Campanella's new content and found some of it compelling. She wasn't a full Glober, she was shapeless, but promoting Flat Earth didn't sit right with her anymore. Mark refused to read her full letter on stream, calling it a Globe recruitment document. But there was one section that mattered for the theory that came next. "I'm not a Glober," Patricia wrote. "I'm still me, but with new information. I'm a truth seeker. I don't simply want to believe anymore. I have not been paid, threatened, or compromised in any way." Only days after Mark received the email, another major flat earther announced his departure, Robbie Davidson, better known as Celebrate Truth. He'd been a prominent figure in the biblical sector of Flat Earth and had organized the first Flat Earth International conferences. Now, he was posting graphics of tombstones on Facebook declaring Flat Earth dead. The last line of his post reads, "I have not been paid, threatened, or compromised in any way." Robbie and Patricia had talked behind the scenes before issuing their statements, which could have explained the similarities in their language. But their departures were so sudden and anti-characteristic that many of their former comrades assumed there must be a broader collusion at play, buyouts, blackmail, or both. The puzzle pieces came together when a third flat earther, Paul in the Plane, announced he was leaving too. Robbie, Patricia, and Paul had a connection. They'd run a podcast where they promoted a cryptocurrency called Axion, which suffered the same fate as most other cryptocurrencies. Marty Leeds, a minister and flat earth promoter, developed a new theory. The promotion of Axion was an SEC violation that could result in jail time. So the three now former flat earthers must have been coerced into leaving the community under threat of criminal charges. Mark and Dave picked up on the story almost immediately. Soon, it was canon. The former flat earthers were not pleased. Marty, Mark, and Dave each received a letter from Dirk Muse, a partnered attorney at Wilson, Elser, Moskowitz, Edelman, and Dicker, LLP. The letter demanded that all three cease and desist from alluding to my client's involvement with illegal activities or receiving goods or money from authorities in exchange for leaving the Flat Earth community. It also called for the removal of any content that contained false, defamatory, or misleading statements, as well as public retractions of those statements. If the recipients did not comply, his clients would consider filing defamation suits. Marty Leeds complied, issuing a retraction and removing the video that triggered the uproar. But Mark and Dave were less agreeable. Mark read the letter live on Strange World, daring the former colleagues to act. The lawsuit never came. The damage, though, was significant enough for Duffy, supported by Campanella's new interview series, We Were Flat, to claim an exodus. We Were Flat only lasted 7 episodes, but Campanella's campaign against his former community continues. Now it looks more like vaguely anti-Semitic AI-generated diss tracks against Dave Weiss mixed with TikTok live debates against any flat earthers who choose to pop in. Lee's Beth only lasted 2 episodes as Strange World's new co-host. Robbie Davidson's recent posts are all about Charlie Kirk. Patricia Steer shows off her cats and home renovations on Instagram. Paul on the Plane wasn't relevant enough to track. Duffy was never going to end the flat earth debate. It just wasn't possible. Fixating on a single piece of evidence to disprove a system so complex and well hidden, one that's believed in by a group that, by their own admission, can't agree on anything beyond the lack of curvature, was an approach doomed to fail. A community founded on dissent was never going to give an updated version of the frameworks they've been fighting for a decade. What Duffy did manage to do is create a challenge for the community that they hadn't yet faced, a vocal departure of a few of their own in a matter of weeks. The illusion of a people united by belief was shattered, revealing relationships built instead through the shared experience of ostracization. Of course, it's okay to change your mind. Flat earthers say so too. But major players joining mainstream Globers was always going to read as deep betrayal of the cause. The community had managed to recover, but there's still a shudder at conferences when the final experiment gets mentioned. One of the first things Mark said to me was that he'd spent the past year conducting damage control. Antarctica also forced flat earthers to reevaluate elements of the theory they'd taken for granted. Campanella isn't wrong when he says that the community had coasted on pre-existing belief over the recent years. The final experiment brought a new enemy, an invigorating call to defend the model that didn't come from classic adversaries repeating old proofs. As much as Antarctica killed part of the community, it also gave it new life. As for now, the 24-hour sun works in the flat earth model. There's still no definitive answer. There remains a contingent of the flat earthers to believe the Antarctic expedition never happened. If you ask a flat earther how the phenomenon occurs, answers range from reflections to plasma to billions of individual suns that match each of our own paths. But really, the insistence upon knowing is a remnant of the borrowed tenets of traditional science that flat earth would be better served abandoning. While there are few flat earthers that would argue with the notion that that faith is key to their belief system, Antarctica makes faith an absolute necessity. Whoever or whatever created the Earth created it with such an extraordinary range of features that attempts to fit them into a clear-cut model will always fail. The 24-hour sun wasn't the end of flat Earth. It was and is evidence that there's still a bit of wonder in a world waiting to be explored. Next section. When I knew. On the second night, DJ asked about my family and I could rest again. I didn't mean to, but I told him that when I was 15, there was nothing more I wanted than to die. That my dad, still in his scrubs, was the one to take my vitals. That we dragged a mattress to the floor of the guest room. That was for 9 months. I slept there with my mom in the bed above me. Above us, then, were stars. More than I'd ever seen in a single night. Ones I kept catching, stream, and flee. The sky holding them seemed to shimmer, protect. And when I let myself learn there, past the bonfire, past quartzite, past valleys, past coast, and past home, everything there ever is was flat. Next section. How to tell a conversion story. It's hard to separate me from flatness. There's no end to the, "Oh, you're the flat earth girl" responses I get from strangers when they hear my name. Which comes with the territory, I guess. But I'm frequently surprised by the sideshow air to the way they say it. Most of the time, they just want to know more, which is great. I want to tell them more. For them to fully engage, though, I have to pass a test, one I feel coming from miles away. Wait, are you a flat earther? My response puts them at ease, as if it makes me an anthropologist, some such credible but unconverted observer, as if it makes me neutral. They take it as a permission to use words like idiot or insane to describe people I just said were my friends. I smile through gritted teeth, challenge them softly, and leave wishing I'd answered them differently. Always I wish I had said, why does it matter? It's not just strangers. No matter how earnestly I discussed my investment in the community with friends and loved ones, if I let my guard down, if I managed to forget, if I let slip my admiration for the flat earthers in my life, I might be met with something sideways, dismissive, or scathing. I don't think they see it that way, but that's how it plays to me. I will not pretend to know what it's like to lose people completely. I will not pretend to know what it's like to be forced into isolation, to have my life turned upside down because I told the wrong person what I believe. But I do know what it's like for someone I trust to respond to a story I found beautiful by laughing in my face or by sighing and shaking their head. I know what it's like to have a near stranger curse me out in the street, and I know what it's like to laugh it off and keep talking until they begrudgingly tell me I'm doing good work. I love these conversations, really. I do. But when they start, I feel my chest go tight and pressure build behind my eyes. When I returned from Arizona, filled to the brim with joy, I somehow expected something different. I'd seen the beauty with my own eyes, physically stepped into it. Didn't that count for something more? Sometimes it did. More often, though, I waited until I got to my car for frustrated tears to spill over. I shut down and stepped away and nestled into the spaces where it did count. A Word document, a Strange World chat room, Tom's office. I wondered how many spaces are left the flat earthers I'd met, and I grieved for all the spaces that they'd lost. I started this essay because I was struck by the similarities in how I became a flat earther stories I encountered, by the comfort the community takes in sharing these stories with one another, by the way their testimony is an open hand. And it's been unfinished for months. I just couldn't. It seemed too disingenuous. It felt like mockery because I hadn't figured out what made it necessary. I didn't have a reason. I didn't yet know what I know it is now. An ode to stories that create new spaces, and a lament for responses that take them away. Yes, conversion story similarities are real and infrequent. You start with doubt. As a child, you always knew something was off. You thought it was ridiculous at first. You did your best to disprove it in all the ways you might expect. There were sleepless nights and isolation. With acceptance, you reshaped yourself. They have to be similar. These are stories of unlearning in earnest, of learning and relearning. Sometimes they sit in the evidence pit too long. Sometimes they twist or lash out. But believe me when I say that stories of conversion are always, without fail, more vulnerable and moving than skepticism allows. Because they all tend to end the same way, at the part where we arrive, the rest of us, as unwilling and as certain as we ever are. You tried to spread the word, but no one was willing to follow you. You slipped it into conversation when you could, but you knew all too well you were alone. Sometimes you wished you'd never learned the truth in the first place. But you discovered that believers are willing to talk, that they can hear you, that they share your frustration, and they know the aloneness of being pushed from your life for trying to pull others in. You didn't want to lose what you've lost. You don't think anyone should have to. but you've turned your back on non-believers because they've turned your back on you. Maybe not forever, but you know you can't exist alongside them in all the ways you did before. You hope that they're okay there, because this is where you are now. That's it. It's the end. Anyone wants a printed copy of this in PDF, I will send it to you. Just email me at msargent, msargent, flatearth, @outlook.com. Or you can find me on Telegram or WhatsApp or just anywhere else, and I will send it to you. It's not very big. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys.